I stood frozen in my childhood home's living room on Christmas Eve, watching my parents present my youngest brother with his college acceptance letter and their promise to pay his full tuition just like they'd done for my other three siblings before him. The twinkling lights on our 12-foot Douglas fir seemed to mock me as I remembered standing in this exact spot 5 years ago, holding my own acceptance letter, only to be told the money had mysteriously run out when it was my turn. Now here I was, 28 years old with a Grammy nomination under my belt, and they acted like they never crushed my dreams into dust. Growing up as the middle child in the Patterson family meant watching from the sidelines as achievements were celebrated, but only when they fit into a very specific mold. Our two-story colonial house in Westchester County buzzed with academic accomplishments and carefully orchestrated success stories. My older sister Sarah had always been the shining example, her report cards displayed on the refrigerator like holy relics, each A+ a testament to the Patterson standard of excellence. I remember the autumn day when Sarah's Harvard acceptance letter arrived. I was 14 practicing guitar in my room when I heard my mother's squeal of delight echo through the house. By the time I made it downstairs, champagne was already flowing and my father was on the phone with his golf buddies, boasting about his daughter, the future lawyer. The check he wrote that night for her first semester was displayed prominently on the kitchen counter for weeks, a $50,000 promise that Patterson children would never want for education. 2 years later, it was David's turn. My older brother had chosen medicine, a path that made my parents' eyes light up at every dinner party. Yale Medical School acceptance meant another celebration, another massive check written with flourish, another round of phone calls to relatives. I sat at the piano that night, playing a composition I'd written for my music theory class, but nobody asked to hear it. They were too busy planning David's future, discussing which specialty would be most lucrative, debating whether he should focus on cardiology or neurosurgery. Throughout high school, I excelled in my own way. Music wasn't just a subject for me, it was the language I spoke most fluently. My voice could fill an auditorium, and my guitar became an extension of my soul. State competitions became my proving ground, and I collected trophies the way my siblings collected academic honors. My parents seemed supportive enough, driving me to performances and paying for private lessons with increasingly expensive instructors. Mrs. Chen, my vocal coach, often told them I had the gift, that raw talent combined with fierce dedication that couldn't be taught. They nodded and smiled, writing checks for her sessions, buying me professional-grade equipment for my 16th birthday. A Taylor guitar that cost more than most cars teenagers drove. A home recording setup that transformed my bedroom into a mini studio. They even converted the basement into a soundproof practice space, telling their friends about their musically gifted daughter with something that almost resembled pride. Junior year brought college planning, and while Sarah was finishing law school and David was deep in residency applications, I had my sights set on one place, Berklee College of Music in Boston. It was the dream factory for musicians like me, the place where raw talent was refined into professional artistry. My teachers wrote glowing recommendation letters. My audition pieces were polished until they shone. The application was a labor of love, each essay crafted to show not just my talent, but my burning passion for music. The acceptance letter came on a rainy Tuesday in March. I remember running from the mailbox, the envelope getting damp in the drizzle, my hands shaking as I tore it open in the kitchen. "Congratulations, Kathleen Patterson. You have been accepted to Berklee College of Music." The words blurred through tears of joy. This was it. This was my Harvard, my Yale. This was my moment. My 18th birthday fell 2 weeks later, and my parents insisted on a special dinner. They took me to Romano's, the Italian place we only went to for major celebrations. I wore my best dress, the blue one that brought out my eyes, and spent the entire appetizer course babbling about Boston, about the professors I'd researched, about the recording studios on campus. My mother kept exchanging glances with my father, and I assumed they were just overwhelmed by my enthusiasm. As the main course arrived, my father cleared his throat. That sound I'd learn later was the soundtrack to shattered dreams. He pulled out a folder, and for one breathless moment, I thought it might contain financial aid forms or bank account information for my college fund. Instead, he spread out investment statements, loss reports, bankruptcy papers for a business I'd never heard of. The Kathleen sweetheart. My mother began her voice, taking on that careful tone she used for delivering bad news. We need to talk about college. The story that followed was a masterclass in family betrayal disguised as misfortune. Apparently, my Uncle Stephen had approached them with a can't-miss investment opportunity, a tech startup that was going to revolutionize something or other. The details were fuzzy, probably, because they were fabricating them on the spot. The bottom line delivered with practiced sorrow was that my college fund had been invested and lost. Every penny earmarked for my education had vanished into the ether of a failed business venture. "We still believe in your talent," my father said, reaching across the table to pat my hand like I was a child who'd skinned her knee. "But Berkeley, it's just not financially possible anymore." I sat there, my celebratory dinner turning to ash in my mouth, watching my parents perform their well-rehearsed tragedy. My mother dabbed at her eyes with her napkin, careful not to smudge her makeup. My father's shoulders slumped with the weight of his fictional failure. And somewhere between the tiramisu I couldn't eat and the check they still somehow had money to pay my future evaporated like morning mist. The drive home was silent, except for the rain against the windshield. I sat in the back seat like I had as a child, watching the familiar streets of my neighborhood pass by each house, a reminder of the life I thought I'd be leaving behind. My acceptance letter was still in my purse, already feeling like a relic from another lifetime. 5 years later, standing in that same living room, watching them promise Marcus everything they denied me, I realized that sound of my father clearing his throat had been the opening note in a symphony of lies I was only beginning to understand. 3 weeks after my birthday dinner disaster, I was sitting in my room trying to make sense of scholarship applications that seemed designed to crush hope. The Berkeley acceptance letter was pinned to my bulletin board, its cheerful logo a daily mockery of what could have been. My guitar sat untouched in the corner. I couldn't bring myself to play. Music felt like a luxury I could no longer afford to love. That's when I heard my father's voice drifting up through the heating vent, the one that connected my room to his home office below. He was on the phone, and something in his tone made me freeze. Gone was the mournful regret from our dinner conversation. This was his business voice, confident and calculating. "No, Stephen, everything went according to plan," he said, and I felt my blood turn to ice. Uncle Stephen, the one whose failed business had supposedly destroyed my future, Kathleen bought the whole story. She's not asking questions about the money. I dropped to my knees beside the vent, pressing my ear against the metal grate. My mother's voice joined the conversation. She must have been on speaker. "The real challenge will be getting her to pivot to something practical," she said. "Music was always a phase. She needs to understand that now. We've already set up the meeting with Westfield Community College. Their accounting program is excellent, and with her grades she'll qualify for their merit scholarship. The money we saved by not sending her to that music school can go toward the Florida property," my father continued. "The realtor says if we move fast, we can close by summer. Early retirement is looking more feasible every day." I couldn't breathe. The room spun around me as their words sank in. There had been no failed investment, no Uncle Stephen's startup, just a calculated decision that my dreams weren't worth investing in. The scholarship form scattered on my desk blurred through tears of rage. "What if she refuses the community college option?" my mother asked. "Then she'll learn what the real world is like without our support," my father replied. "A few months of struggling will bring her around. Music isn't a career. It's an expensive hobby. We're doing her a favor." I must have made a sound because suddenly their voices stopped. I held my breath waiting, but the conversation didn't resume. Carefully, I stood and walked to my desk, my mind racing. Everything made sense now. The looks they'd exchanged at dinner, the speed with which they'd produced an alternative plan, the way they'd never shown any real emotion about supposedly losing my college fund. At dinner that night, I played dumb. I pushed food around my plate while they talked about the wonderful opportunity at Westfield Community College. My mother had already gotten the application forms. My father knew someone in the accounting department who could put in a good word. They spoke as if my acceptance to one of the most prestigious music schools in the world was just a minor setback, easily corrected with a pivot to something sensible. "I'm still thinking about my options," I said, carefully watching their faces. "Well, don't think too long," my father said, cutting his steak with precision. "The community college deadline is next month. You don't want to miss out on a real future because you're clinging to a pipe dream." A pipe dream. That's what he called the thing that made me feel most alive. The next few days were torture. I went through the motions of normalcy while planning my investigation. I knew my parents kept financial documents in my father's office in the mahogany filing cabinet he'd inherited from his father. The lock was laughably simple. YouTube had taught me how to pick it in under 5 minutes. I waited until they went to their weekly dinner with the Richardsons. Sarah was back at law school, David at the hospital. Marcus was at basketball practice. The house was mine. I had 2 hours. The filing cabinet opened with a soft click. Inside, manila folders were arranged with military precision. Tax returns, investment portfolios, property deeds, and there in a folder marked education funds, I found the truth laid out in black and white. 4 accounts, 4 children, 4 futures mapped out in numbers. Sarah's account paid in full to Harvard. David's account paid in full to Yale. Marcus's account $250,000 and growing. And mine $225,000 untouched. Not lost, not invested. Just sitting there accumulating interest while I filled out scholarship applications for grants I'd never get because my parents' income was too high. But that wasn't the worst part. Paper clipped to my account statement was a handwritten note in my mother's careful script. "Kathleen, hold for alternative use. Florida property, down payment, discuss with Thomas." I photographed everything with my phone, my hands shaking. As I went to close the cabinet, another folder caught my eye. Florida properties. Inside were real estate listings, photos of beachfront condos, correspondence with realtors. The dates went back 2 years. They'd been planning this before I even started my college applications. Every encouraging word about my music, every dollar spent on lessons and equipment had been given with the full knowledge that they'd never let me pursue it professionally. I heard the garage door opening and quickly shut everything back in place. By the time my parents walked in, I was in the living room calmly reading a Westfield Community College brochure. "Oh, good, you're looking at the materials," my mother said, her smile bright and false. "Isn't their business program impressive?" "Very," I lied, matching her tone. Inside, I was calculating, planning. If they could be strategic about my future, I could be strategic about my escape. Over the next week, I played the part of the defeated daughter coming to terms with reality. I attended the Westfield meeting, asked questions about accounting courses, even filled out the application in front of them. My father actually smiled when I signed it. "You're making the smart choice," he said, squeezing my shoulder. 10 years from now, you'll thank us." Meanwhile, I was researching everything. Recording contracts, music industry jobs, cost of living in cities with thriving music scenes, how to survive without parental support, how to build credit, how to find roommates, how to make it when the people who were supposed to lift you up were the ones holding you down. My siblings' reactions to my new direction were revealing. Sarah called from law school, her voice dripping with condescension. Finally being realistic, I see. Music was never going to pay the bills, Kath. David texted between surgeries, "Good call. Maybe you can minor in music or something. Keep it as a hobby." Marcus home from basketball practice was the cruelest. "Guess you're not so special after all," he said, helping himself to leftovers while I sat at the kitchen table with my community college forms. "Mom and Dad always said you'd grow out of the music thing." They all knew. Maybe not the specifics, but they knew I was being denied what they'd been given freely, and they were fine with it. The family hierarchy was clear, practical careers at the top, dreams at the bottom, and me somewhere beneath consideration. That night, I sat in my soundproof basement studio, the one my parents had built when they were still pretending to support my dreams. I picked up my Taylor guitar, the one they'd given me with such fanfare. My fingers found the frets, and I played for the first time in weeks. But this wasn't the joyful music of before. This was something darker, angrier. This was the sound of betrayal set to melody. I thought about the check my father had written for Sarah's first semester. $50,000 signed with a flourish. The same hand that had signed my community college recommendation letter, sealing my fate to a life they'd chosen for me. The unfairness of it burned in my chest like acid. Through my window, I could see into the kitchen where my parents sat with their coffee and tablets, probably browsing Florida real estate listings funded by my stolen future. They looked so normal, so content with their deception. How many family dinners had we shared while they plotted against me? How many proud parent moments had been performances? The guitar strings vibrated under my fingers as I played, and I made a decision. They could keep their money. They could have their Florida retirement property. They could tell their friends whatever story made them feel better about themselves, but they couldn't have my soul. They couldn't kill the music in me, no matter how hard they tried. I would find another way. I had to, because staying here pretending to be grateful for their guidance would be a different kind of death. The kind where you're still breathing, but everything that makes you who you are has been suffocated. That wasn't going to be my story, not anymore. The confrontation came on a humid Thursday evening in late April. I'd spent 2 weeks perfecting my performance as the obedient daughter attending Westfield Community College orientation sessions and meeting with academic advisors about accounting prerequisites. My parents had relaxed their guard, confident their plan was working. They didn't notice me slowly packing my belongings into boxes I hid in my closet, or the way I'd started saying goodbye to pieces of my childhood room. I chose dinner time for maximum impact. The whole family was there. My parents at their usual spots at either end of our oak dining table, Marcus shoveling pasta while scrolling through his phone, even Sarah home for a brief visit before her final exams. The scene was so perfectly domestic it made my stomach turn. "I need to talk to you all about something." I began setting down my fork with deliberate calm. My father glanced up from his tablet where he'd been reviewing property listings. "If this is about adding a music minor at Westfield, we've discussed this. Your schedule won't allow for distractions." "It's not about a minor," I said, pulling out my phone. "It's about the $225,000 sitting in my education fund. The one you told me was lost in Uncle Steven's failed business venture." The silence that followed was absolute. Marcus's fork hung halfway to his mouth. Sarah's wine glass stopped midway to her lips. My mother's face went through a series of expressions, surprise, calculation, and finally a cold anger I'd never seen before. "I don't know what you think you know," my father started, but I was already pulling up the photos on my phone. "I know everything," I said, sliding my phone across the table so they could see their own financial documents displayed on the screen. The accounts, the Florida property plans, the note about holding my college fund for alternative use. 2 years of planning to steal my future while pretending to support my dreams. "You broke into my office." My father's voice was dangerously quiet, the tone he used when closing contentious business deals. "You violated our privacy." "You violated my trust," I shot back. You looked me in the eye on my 18th birthday and lied. You let me believe I'd lost my chance at Berkeley because of bad luck, when really you just decided my dreams weren't worth investing in. Music isn't a career, my mother interjected, her composure returning. It's a fantasy. We made a parental decision to guide you towards stability. A parental decision. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. You gave Sarah $50,000 her first semester at Harvard. You wrote checks for David's Yale education without blinking. But when it came to me, suddenly you're concerned about stability. Wool, law, and medicine are legitimate professions, Sarah chimed in, setting down her wine glass. What were you going to do with a music degree, teach middle school band? I was accepted to Berkeley, I said, my voice rising. Do you understand what that means? The acceptance rate is lower than Harvard's. But none of you care about that because it doesn't fit your narrow definition of success. Watch your tone, my father warned, standing up. His 6-foot frame was meant to be intimidating, a tactic he'd used throughout my childhood. But I wasn't a child anymore. Or what I stood to, matching his stance. You'll take away my college fund. Oh, wait, you already did that. That money is ours to allocate as we see fit, he said. We've provided you with a roof over your head, food, clothing, everything you needed. If we decide that investing in a music degree is financially irresponsible, that's our choice. Then giving it to Sarah and David was your choice too, I said. The only difference is you believed in their dreams and not mine, because their dreams were realistic. My mother's mask finally slipped completely. Do you know how many failed musicians are living in their cars, playing in subway stations for spare change? We're protecting you from that life. By forcing me into a life I never wanted, I could feel tears threatening, but I refused to let them fall. By lying to me, by planning behind my back to use my education fund for your early retirement. How dare you, my mother hissed, after everything we've done for you. You mean after everything you've done for everyone except me, I corrected. Tell me, when did you decide? When I was 15 and won state championships? When I was 16 and my teacher said I had professional potential? Or was it earlier? Was there ever a moment when you actually believed in me? Marcus had shrunk into his chair, probably realizing his college fund was secure while mine had been sacrificed. Sarah was studying her wine like it held the secrets of the universe. But it was my parents' faces that told the whole story. No shame, no regret, just anger that I discovered their deception. If you can't appreciate the opportunity we're giving you at Westfield, my father said, his voice arctic, then perhaps you need to experience life without our support entirely. Thomas, my mother warned, but he held up his hand. No, Helen, she wants to act like an adult, make adult accusations. Then she can face adult consequences. Kathleen, you have two choices. You can apologize for this outburst, accept our guidance, and start at Westfield as planned. Or you can pursue your music dream on your own. But if you choose that path, you leave this house with nothing. No financial support, no room to come back to. Nothing. You're giving me an ultimatum. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Choose your plan or be disowned. We're giving you a reality check, he said. What's it going to be? I looked around the table, at Sarah, who'd gotten everything she wanted without question. At Marcus, whose future was secure before he'd even figured out what he wanted to study. At my parents, who'd rather see me homeless than pursuing my passion. The choice was no choice at all. I'll take door number 2, I said, surprising myself with how steady my voice sounded. Don't be ridiculous, my mother said. You have no money, no plan. Where will you go? Anywhere but here, I replied, heading for the stairs. I'd rather sleep in my car than spend another night under this roof, pretending to be grateful for your conditional love. I took the stairs 2 at a time, adrenaline coursing through my veins. Behind me, I could hear my father's voice. If you walk out that door, don't bother coming back. My room looked different now, knowing it would be the last time I'd see it. I pulled out the boxes I'd hidden and started filling them with essentials: clothes, toiletries, my laptop, song notebooks filled with years of compositions. The guitar was already in its case waiting. Sarah appeared in my doorway. "You're being stupid," she said flatly. "Swallow your pride and apologize. They'll forgive you by morning." "Like you swallowed your pride when they paid for Harvard?" I asked, not looking up from my packing. "Oh, wait, you never had to. Your dreams were acceptable." "Life isn't fair," she said. "Get over it." "You're right," I agreed, zipping up my duffel bag. "Life isn't fair, but that doesn't mean I have to accept injustice from my own family." She left without another word. Marcus never came upstairs at all. 20 minutes later, I stood in my room one last time. The Berkeley acceptance letter still hung on my bulletin board. I took it down, folded it carefully, and tucked it into my pocket, a reminder of what could have been, a promise of what might still be. The walk downstairs felt like a funeral march. My family had reassembled in the living room, waiting for my surrender. The shock on their faces when they saw my packed bags was almost worth it. "This is your last chance," my father said. "Think about what you're throwing away." "I'm not throwing anything away," I said. "You already did that for me." My mother stood up, and for a moment I thought she might try to stop me. Instead, she walked to the antique secretary desk where she kept her checkbook. With sharp, angry movements, she wrote out a check and held it out to me. "Here," she said, $1,000. It's more than you deserve after this stunt, but I won't have people saying we threw you out with nothing." I looked at the check. $1,000. After $225,000 in stolen education funds, the insult was breathtaking. "Keep it," I said, but she forced it into my hand. "Take it and go," she said, her voice cold as winter. "And don't you dare come back here asking for more. As far as we're concerned, we have 3 children now." I pocketed the check, not because I wanted their money, but because I knew refusing it would prolong this agony. My father opened the front door, standing beside it, like a bouncer ejecting an unruly patron. No final words, no last-minute change of heart, just cold dismissal. I carried my boxes to my beat-up Honda Civic, the car they'd given me for my 16th birthday, back when they still pretended to care. 3 trips, and everything I owned was packed inside. As I arranged my guitar case in the back seat, I caught sight of my siblings watching from the living room window. Sarah with her arms crossed, Marcus looking uncomfortable but unwilling to intervene. The engine started on the second try. As I backed out of the driveway I'd learned to drive in, I allowed myself one last look at the house where I'd grown up. The porch light was already off. They'd probably change the locks by morning. I drove to the end of our street and pulled over my hands, shaking too hard to continue. The $1,000 check sat in my pocket like a lead weight. $1,000 to start a new life. $1,000 as severance pay for 18 years as their daughter. $1,000 and a message: you're on your own now and don't ever ask for help again. But as I sat there in my car, surrounded by everything I owned, something strange happened. The tears I'd been fighting finally came, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of relief. The weight of their expectations, their disappointments, their conditional love, it was all gone. I was homeless, broke, and completely alone, but for the first time in my life, I was free. I pulled back onto the road and drove toward downtown. I had no idea where I was going to sleep that night. No idea how I was going to survive. But I had my guitar, my voice, and a burning determination to prove them wrong. They thought they were teaching me a lesson about reality. Instead, they'd given me the greatest gift imaginable: nothing left to lose. The radio was playing a song about starting over, and I turned it up, letting the music wash over me. Somewhere out there was a life where my dreams mattered, where my talent was valued, where love didn't come with terms and conditions. I just had to be brave enough to find it, and if that meant sleeping in my car and showering at the gym, so be it. Rock bottom, I was about to learn, was just another stage to perform on. The first night sleeping in my Honda Civic taught me things about discomfort I'd never imagined. I'd parked in a 24-hour Walmart parking lot, reasoning that security wouldn't bother someone who looked like they were just napping between shopping trips. The driver's seat reclined only so far, and my 5'7" frame folded awkwardly across the center console. By 3 in the morning, my neck screamed in protest, and my feet had gone numb from being wedged against the door. I'd been naive enough to think this would be temporary, maybe a week or two of roughing it before I found a cheap room to rent. Reality hit hard when I started calculating expenses on my phone's calculator. That $1,000 check, which I'd cashed with shaking hands, wouldn't even cover first month's rent and security deposit anywhere remotely safe. Gas, food, phone bill, the basic mathematics of survival added up to impossibility. The Walmart bathroom became my morning routine. I'd wait until 6 when the store was quieter, then shuffle in with my toiletry bag hidden in a shopping basket, pretending to be an early morning shopper. The fluorescent lights made my reflection look ghostly as I brushed my teeth and tried to make myself presentable using paper towels and hand soap. Other women came and went, some giving me knowing looks that suggested I wasn't the first person to use these facilities as a makeshift washroom. Finding work proved harder than expected. My resume padded with high school achievements and music competition wins meant nothing in the real world. Restaurant managers took one look at my Westchester address and designer jeans remnants from my former life and assumed I was some rich kid playing at Rebellion who'd quit the moment things got tough. "Oh, we need someone reliable," said the manager at Rosario's diner, barely glancing up from his clipboard. "Not someone who'll run back to mommy and daddy when dishwashing gets too hard." "I won't," I insisted, but he was already calling for the next applicant. It was Melissa, the night manager at a 24-hour gym called Fit Life, who finally took a chance on me. Maybe she recognized the desperation in my eyes, or maybe she just needed someone willing to work the graveyard shift nobody wanted. "Midnight to 6. She said, sliding a uniform shirt across the counter. "You'll clean equipment, do laundry, basic maintenance. Minimum wage. You miss a shift without calling, you're done. Got it?" "Oh, got it," I said, clutching that polyester shirt like a lifeline. The job was mind-numbing. Wiping down treadmills at 3 in the morning while watching lone insomniacs pound out their anxieties. Folding endless towels that reeked of sweat and ambition. But it came with a crucial perk shower access. After my shift, I could use the facilities to properly clean up before heading to my other jobs. Because one minimum wage job wasn't enough. Not even close. I picked up afternoon shifts at a coffee shop called Bean There, where the manager didn't care about my background as long as I could work the espresso machine without breaking it. Evenings meant food delivery using my Honda and praying it wouldn't break down as I ferried pad thai and pizza to people living the lives I used to take for granted. Sundays were for performing. I'd found a rotation of open mics around the city, each with its own personality. The Velvet Touch was pretentious, full of poetry majors who snapped instead of clapped. Murphy's Tavern was rowdier, where you had to compete with football games on the TV. But my favorite was the Songbird Cafe, a tiny place run by an elderly couple who actually listened to the performers. "You've got something special," Mrs. Chen, no relation to my old vocal coach, told me one night after I'd performed an original song about family betrayal. "Pain like that, it makes the music real." But compliments didn't pay bills. The tips I earned from performing barely covered the gas to get to venues. My diet consisted of whatever was on sale at the grocery store, usually generic ramen and day-old bread. I learned which restaurants threw out perfectly good food at closing time and swallowed my pride along with leftover sandwiches retrieved from dumpsters. The Honda became my universe. The back seat was my closet clothes folded in plastic bins. The glove compartment held my toiletries. The trunk stored my guitar and the few possessions I couldn't bear to sell. I'd found a spot behind an abandoned strip mall where I could park overnight without being hassled, though the isolation made every sound terrifying. 3 months in exhaustion was my constant companion. Working 3 jobs meant sleeping in fragments, catching 20 minutes here, an hour there. I dozed off at a red light more than once, jerking awake to angry honking. My body operated on caffeine and stubbornness, but even those were wearing thin. The breaking point came in November. An early winter storm hit while I was delivering Chinese food, and my Honda's worn tires couldn't handle the ice. I skidded into a guardrail not hard enough to deploy airbags, but enough to crumple my front bumper and kill the engine. The tow truck driver looked at my car packed with my entire life and shook his head. "Radiator's cracked," he said, looking at 800 minimum to fix it. 800 might as well have been 8,000. I sat in my dead car as snow accumulated on the windshield, finally understanding what my parents had tried to force me to see. This was the life of a failed musician. This was where dreams led when reality intervened. I called in sick to all 3 jobs and spent the night in my freezing car wrapped in every piece of clothing I owned. My phone battery died around midnight, cutting off my last connection to the world. In the darkness, with snow muffling all sound, I felt something inside me break. Not my spirit exactly, but my stubborn insistence that this was temporary. This was my life now. This was who I'd become. Morning brought numb fingers and the very real possibility of frostbite. I managed to flag down a passing jogger who called a tow truck. The driver, different from the night before, took pity on me and towed the Honda to his shop, agreeing to a payment plan I had no idea how I'd manage. The waiting room had heat and coffee, and I nearly cried from gratitude. While waiting for the diagnosis, I pulled out my phone charge at the shop's outlet and scrolled through social media for the first time in months. Sarah had posted photos from a law firm holiday party draped in a dress that cost more than my car repairs. David was skiing in Aspen with his medical school cohort. Marcus had made varsity basketball, my parents flanking him in proud parent photos at his first game. And then I saw it. A video posted by some random person I didn't even know, shared into my feed by the algorithm's mysterious ways. It was me performing at the Songbird Cafe 2 weeks prior. Someone had filmed my song about betrayal, the one that always made Mrs. Chen tear up. The caption read, "Found this girl performing at open mic. Why isn't she famous? This destroyed me." The video had 12,000 views. The comments were pouring in. "Who is she? I need more." This made me cry at my desk. The pain in her voice. "You can't fake that. Someone sign this girl now." I stared at the screen, not quite believing what I was seeing. 12,000 people had watched me sing. 12,000 people had connected with my pain. It wasn't millions, it wasn't a record deal, but it was something. It was proof that my music could reach people, could matter. "Your car's ready," the mechanic announced. "Managed to patch the radiator for now, but it's temporary. 300 instead of 8. 300 I didn't have, but I'd figure it out. I always did. I thanked him and walked out to my patched-up Honda, feeling something shift in my chest. The video was still playing on my phone, my voice echoing through tinny speakers. 12,000 views and climbing. That night, I didn't park behind the strip mall. Instead, I drove to the Songbird Cafe, even though it wasn't open mic night. Mrs. Chen was there, preparing for the evening crowd. "Kathleen," she exclaimed, "did you see someone filmed you last week? We've had people calling asking when you perform." She showed me her reservation book, pointing to notes she'd scribbled. People wanted to know when I'd be back. They wanted to hear more. For the first time in months, I felt something other than exhaustion and despair. I felt possibility. Winter was coming, and my life was still a disaster. I was homeless, broke, working myself to death for minimum wage. My family had disowned me. My future was uncertain at best, but 12,000 people had heard my pain and wanted more. That had to count for something. I sat in my car that night, guitar in my lap, and wrote a new song. Not about betrayal this time, but about survival, about the strange hope that blooms in the darkest places, about voices finding each other across the void. The words flowed like water, like all the tears I hadn't let myself cry. Maybe this was rock bottom, but at least I'd found my voice here. And apparently, people were starting to listen. The video changed everything and nothing all at once. Views climbed to 50,000 within a week, but viral fame didn't translate to money in my pocket. I still worked my 3 jobs, still showered at FitLife after the midnight shift, still counted every penny twice before spending it. But now people recognize me sometimes, approaching after my grocery store shifts to ask if I was that girl from the video. Marcus Chen found me on a rainy Tuesday evening at the Songbird Cafe. Not my younger brother Marcus, who was probably enjoying his senior year of high school on my parents' dime, but Marcus Chen from Riverside Records, a small indie label that operated out of a converted warehouse in the Arts District. He didn't look like a music executive in his worn leather jacket and scuffed boots, more like someone's cool uncle who played bass in a weekend band. "I've watched your video about 200 times," he said, sliding into the seat across from me during my break between sets. "My daughter sent it to me. She's 15, thinks she knows everything about music, but she was right about you." I gripped my coffee cup tighter, trying to appear calmer than I felt. "Thank you. That's incredible." "Here's the thing." Marcus leaned forward, his eyes intense behind wire-rimmed glasses. "We're not Sony or Universal. Riverside Records is small, independent, and we can't offer you millions. But we can offer you studio time production support and a chance to record your music professionally. Interested?" My hand shook as I set down the coffee. "What's the catch?" He smiled, appreciating my directness. "No catch, just reality. The deal would be modest. 5,000 advance against future earnings, which basically means you won't see more money until your music makes money. You'd need to tour, build your fan base the hard way. Small venues, probably sleeping in vans, eating gas station food. Not exactly glamorous." "I'm currently sleeping in my car and eating ramen twice a day," I said. "Your version sounds like an upgrade." Marcus laughed, a genuine sound that made other patrons glance over. "Fair point. Look, I'll be straight with you. Your video went viral because people can feel your authenticity. That pain in your voice, it's real. We can't manufacture that. But I think with the right production, the right support, you could be something special." He slid a business card across the table. "Think about it. Talk to a lawyer if you know one. Google us, make sure we're legit. But don't think too long. The internet's attention span is short, and we need to capitalize on your momentum." After he left, I sat there staring at the card until Mrs. Chen gently reminded me I had another set to perform. Riverside Records. It wasn't Berkeley, wasn't the path I'd originally planned, but it was a path forward. That night in my car, I researched everything I could find about the label on my phone, burning through precious data. They were real small but respected, known for developing artists who'd been overlooked by bigger labels. I called Marcus the next morning from the FitLife break room, my voice hoarse from lack of sleep. "I'm in," I said simply. "Excellent. Can you come by the studio tomorrow? We'll go over contracts, meet the team, maybe lay down some demos if you're up for it." I was scheduled for a double shift at Bean there tomorrow. Calling in sick again might get me fired, but this was the chance I'd been waiting for, sleeping in parking lots for surviving on leftover food for. "I'll be there," I promised. The Riverside Records building looked nothing like the gleaming towers I'd imagined housed record labels. It was a converted warehouse wedged between a tire shop and a Vietnamese restaurant, its exterior tagged with graffiti that might have been artistic or just vandalism, but inside magic happened. The reception area was cozy rather than corporate, with signed albums covering every wall and a rescue dog named Vinyl sleeping on a worn leather couch. Kathleen Patterson. I told the receptionist, still not quite believing I had an appointment at a real record label. "Marcus is waiting in Studio B," she said, scratching Vinyl behind the ears. "Down the hall, second door on the right. Welcome to Riverside." Studio B took my breath away. Not because it was fancy, the equipment was clearly secondhand, the soundproofing panels patched in places, but because it was real. An actual recording studio where actual music was made. Marcus was there with two other people, a woman with purple-streaked hair introduced as Jenna, the sound engineer, and an older man named Roberto who handled artist development. "Before we sign anything," Roberto said, settling into a creaky office chair, "let's hear what you've got. Play us something that isn't the Betrayal song. We've all seen the video." I unpacked my guitar, suddenly nervous. In my car at open mics, I played for survival. This was different. This was an audition for my future. I chose a song I'd written during one of those freezing nights about finding strength in the darkness, about voices calling across distances. My fingers found the familiar chords and I let the music take over. When I finished, Jenna was wiping her eyes. "Jesus," she muttered. That was exactly what we're looking for," Marcus finished. "Raw, honest, relatable. How many more do you have?" "Dozens," I admitted. "Maybe hundreds. I write when I can't sleep." "And I'm guessing that's often," Roberto observed, taking in my appearance with kind but knowing eyes. "Look, let's talk reality. The advance isn't much, but it should get you off the streets. We've got connections with some artist housing shared spaces, but better than your car. You'll need to keep at least one job because 5,000 won't last long, but maybe you can quit the others." We spent 3 hours going through contracts, which I pretended to understand better than I did. The terms seemed fair enough. They'd cover recording costs, I'd retained ownership of my songs, and we'd split profits after expenses were recouped. It wasn't predatory, just realistic about the economics of independent music. "Oh, one more thing," Marcus said as I signed the papers with hands that wouldn't quite stop trembling. "We want to move fast. How do you feel about recording your first EP next week?" A week. 7 days to prepare for the most important recording session of my life. I thought about my 3 jobs, about letting down managers who'd taken chances on me. Then I thought about my parents probably planning their Florida retirement while I worked myself to death. "I'll make it work," I said. Jenna smiled. "I like her already, tough as nails." The advance check felt surreal in my hands. $5,000. Not life-changing money, but life-saving. I deposited it immediately, keeping out enough cash for the artist housing Roberto had mentioned. It turned out to be a rundown Victorian in Echo Park divided into tiny rooms for struggling musicians. My room was barely bigger than my childhood closet, with a single bed, a desk, and a window that painted a view of the neighboring building's brick wall. It was the most beautiful space I'd ever seen. That night, I sat on my narrow bed with my guitar looking around at my 4 walls that were actually mine at least for the next month. No more checking parking lots for security. No more layering clothes against the cold. No more pretending to shop while using Walmart bathrooms. I had a door that locked a bed that didn't require folding myself into impossible positions, and a chance to make music that mattered. I called each of my jobs to give notice explaining I'd been offered an opportunity I couldn't pass up. Melissa at FitLife was genuinely happy for me. "I knew you weren't going to be wiping down gym equipment forever," she said. "You've got that look like you're meant for something bigger." The coffee shop manager was less understanding, but I couldn't blame him. Reliable employees were hard to find, and I was leaving him short-staffed. But as I hung up the phone, I felt the weight of those minimum wage obligations lifting off my shoulders. My last delivery shift was bittersweet. As I drove familiar routes one final time, I thought about how these streets had been my classroom in survival. Every stingy tip, every late-night delivery to drunk college kids, every moment of wondering if this was all my life would ever be. It had all led to this moment. The EP recording sessions started the following Monday. Jenna had me in the studio for 12 hours that first day, working through arrangements, adjusting levels, finding the perfect sound for each song. She was a perfectionist in the best way, pushing me to dig deeper, sing harder. find emotions I'd been burying under exhaustion. "That betrayal in your voice," she said during a break. "Don't polish it away. That's your superpower." We recorded 5 songs that week. 5 pieces of my soul transferred to digital files that would soon float out into the world. The title track was Empty Promises, the song about betrayal that had started everything, but the other 4 told the rest of the story: survival, hope, determination, and a fierce kind of self-love born from having nothing left to lose. Marcus was there for the final playback, listening with his eyes closed as my voice filled the control room. When the last note faded, he opened his eyes and smiled. "We're going to need to book you some shows," he said. "This is special, Kathleen, really special." As I walked out of Riverside Records, that Friday evening EP officially complete, I passed the Vietnamese restaurant next door. The smell of pho made my stomach growl, and for the first time in months, I could actually afford to go inside and order a meal like a normal person. As I sat there eating soup that tasted like heaven after months of ramen, my phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Forgot to mention, Ryan Walsh's team called. He's looking for opening acts for his acoustic tour. Sent them your rough tracks. Interview tomorrow if you're interested. Ryan Walsh. The Ryan Walsh. Multi-platinum artist, Grammy winner. Someone whose concerts I dreamed of attending back when I thought my parents would pay for college. And now his team wanted to meet me. I set down my phone and took another sip of soup, savoring the complex flavors I'd denied myself for so long. 6 months ago, my parents had thrown me out with nothing but their contempt and a $1,000 check I still hadn't cashed. I'd survived homelessness, exhaustion, and the kind of despair that swallows people whole. But I'd also found my voice, my strength, and now maybe my path forward. The fortune cookie that came with my meal contained a message that made me laugh out loud. "Your perseverance will be rewarded." Yeah, I thought, tucking the slip of paper into my wallet next to that uncashed check. We'll see about that. The meeting was set for 2 o'clock at the Chateau Marmont, the kind of place I'd only seen in magazines. I spent the morning agonizing over what to wear, finally settling on my one decent pair of jeans and a black blazer I'd found at a thrift store. The security guard at the entrance looked at me skeptically until I mentioned Ryan Walsh's team, then his entire demeanor shifted. "Poolside cabana," he said, suddenly respectful. "They're expecting you." Walking through the chateau felt like entering another dimension. Everything whispered money and influence, from the vintage furniture to the carefully casual elegance of the other patrons. I kept my hands at my sides, afraid to touch anything, afraid someone would recognize I didn't belong and escort me out. Ryan Walsh wasn't what I expected. Instead of an entourage and attitude, I found a tired-looking man in his late 30s, wearing a simple t-shirt and jeans, dark circles under his eyes suggesting sleepless nights. His manager, a sharp-dressed woman named Patricia, sat beside him, typing furiously on her phone. "Kathleen." Ryan stood, offering his hand. His handshake was firm but brief. "Thanks for coming. Want anything? Coffee, water?" "Water's fine." I managed, trying not to stare. This was the man whose songs had dominated radio for the past 5 years. "I'll cut to the chase," Ryan said once I was seated. "I listed to your rough tracks. Marcus Chen sent them over. That song, Empty Promises, it wrecked me. Absolutely destroyed me." Patricia looked up from her phone. "Ryan's going through a divorce. Public, messy, lots of betrayal involved. Your music speaks to that." "I'm sorry," I said, not sure what else to offer. Ryan waved off my sympathy. "Don't be. Pain makes better art, right? Look, I'm doing a 20-city acoustic tour, stripped-down, intimate venues, just me and my guitar and whatever demons I'm wrestling with that night. I need an opener who gets it. Someone real, not another manufactured pop princess with a sob story written by committee." "The tour starts in 3 weeks, Patricia interjected. 8 weeks total, hitting major markets and some smaller cities. You do a 30-minute set each night. Pay is $1,500 per show, plus travel and accommodation covered." I did the math quickly. 20 shows at $1,500 each. $30,000. More money than I'd ever seen, enough to truly start over, maybe even take some online music courses. My hands trembled under the table. There's one condition. Ryan continued, his eyes never leaving mine. Your story, the real one about your family and being homeless. We want you to tell it. Not in some exploitative way, but honestly. People need to hear that success doesn't always follow a straight line. You want me to talk about sleeping in my car. I want you to talk about survival, he corrected. About what happens when the people who should support you don't. About finding your voice in the darkness, because that's what your music is about, isn't it? I thought about my parents probably enjoying their morning coffee in their perfect kitchen, secure in their choice to abandon me. Thought about my siblings living their approved lives. Would they see me on tour with Ryan Walsh? Would they care? Yes, I said, I can do that. Good. Ryan smiled for the first time, and I caught a glimpse of the charm that had made him famous. Patricia will handle the contracts. We leave from LAX in 3 weeks. Get your passport updated if needed. We're hitting Vancouver and Toronto too. The meeting ended with another handshake and a folder full of paperwork I'd need to review. As I walked back through the chateau's lobby past people who lounged like they'd never worried about their next meal, I felt the world shifting beneath my feet. Marcus was waiting at Riverside Records when I arrived, practically vibrating with excitement. Ryan Walsh, he exclaimed. Do you understand what this means? The exposure alone could launch your career. His fans are loyal, they'll give you a chance. And if they like you... If they like me, what? I asked, still processing the afternoon's surreal turn. Then you come back from tour with a fan base. We release your EP to people who are already invested in your story. Maybe we get to make a full album. Maybe you headline your own tour next year. Next year. I'd been surviving day to day for so long that thinking about next year felt like imagining life on Mars. But Marcus was already making plans, talking about music videos and social media strategy and merchandise designs. I need to practice, I said, cutting through his enthusiasm. 30 minutes is a long set. I need more songs. So write them, Jenna called from the studio. You've got 3 weeks. I'll help with arrangements. The next 3 weeks blurred together in a haze of preparation. I wrote constantly, mining my experiences for new material. Songs about dignity found in minimum wage work, about friendship, discovered in unexpected places like Mrs. Chen's knowing smile, about the strange freedom that comes from losing everything. Jenna worked with me daily, helping shape raw emotion into performable pieces. Roberto handled the practical elements. He found me a vocal coach who worked with my natural style rather than trying to polish away the rough edges. A movement coach helped me learn to command a stage instead of hiding behind my guitar. There were photo shoots for promotional materials where they dressed me in clothes that cost more than my car repairs while keeping the styling authentically indie. We're selling your truth, the photographer explained, adjusting lights, but truth still needs good lighting. 2 days before departure, I sat in my tiny room at the artist's house, surrounded by new luggage, a gift from the label, my passport, and printed copies of my set list. My guitar case leaned against the wall, covered in new stickers from venues I'd soon play. Everything was ready except me. My phone rang, unknown number, local area code. Against my better judgment, I answered. Kathleen. The voice was female, familiar, but changed. It took me a moment to place it. Sarah, my sister. How did you get this number? I asked, my voice carefully neutral. It's not important. Look, I heard about the tour. Ryan Walsh's team sent out a press release and someone forwarded it to me, said his opener was from Westchester, had a compelling story about family estrangement. And Mom and Dad don't know yet, but they will. Kathleen, you can't do this. You can't air our family's private business on stage across the country. Our family's private business, I laughed, but it was sharp, bitter. You mean how they lied to me, how they stole my future, how you all watched them throw me out and did nothing? It's more complicated than that, Sarah protested. You don't understand the pressure they were under, the economy, their investments. Stop, I interrupted. Just stop. I've heard all the excuses. I lived in my car, Sarah. I ate from dumpsters. I worked 3 jobs just to survive while you were at wine tastings and law firm galas. So, don't tell me about pressure. If you do this, her voice turned cold lawyer mode activated. If you tell these stories publicly, there will be consequences. Legal consequences. Defamation, slander. Truth isn't defamation, I shot back. But thanks for the warning. Nice to know the family tradition of threats continues. I hung up before she could respond, then blocked the number. My hands shook as I set down the phone. They knew. Of course they knew. In 3 weeks, I'd gone from invisible to undeniable, and they couldn't stand it. That night, I played the Songbird Cafe one last time before the tour. Mrs. Chen had made special flyers, and the tiny venue was packed. Local musicians I'd met during my struggles came to wish me well. Even Melissa from Fit Life showed up giving me a fierce hug. "Knock 'em dead," she whispered. "Show them what us midnight shifters are made of." As I performed, I looked out at the faces of people who'd witnessed my lowest moments. Unlike my family, they'd offered help when they could. A free coffee here, an extra tip there, a kind word when darkness felt overwhelming. They were my chosen family, the ones who saw potential in a homeless girl with a guitar. This last song, I announced tuning for Empty Promises, is about learning that blood doesn't always mean family. Sometimes family is the old woman who saves you a table at her cafe. Sometimes it's the night shift manager who lets you use the shower. Sometimes it's the indie label owner who takes a chance on you. Thank you all for being my family when I had none. The next morning, Marcus drove me to LAX himself, my guitar and suitcases loaded in his beat-up SUV. "You nervous?" he asked as we navigated airport traffic. Terrified, I admitted. What if Ryan's fans hate me? What if I freeze on stage? What if you're amazing? Marcus interrupted. What if this is the beginning of everything you've worked for, Kathleen? You've survived worse than some stage fright. You've got this. At the departure gate, Ryan's touring crew was already assembled. Musicians, techs, tour managers, a small army of people who made the magic happen. Patricia handed me an itinerary thick as a novel. "First show is tomorrow night in Seattle," she said. "Sold out, 3,000 capacity. You go on at 8. 3,000 people. The largest crowd I'd played for was maybe 100 at the Songbird on a good night. But as I boarded the plane, guitar safely stowed overhead, I thought about all the nights I'd sung to myself in my car, all the songs born from pain and perseverance. 3,000 people were about to hear what happened when you pushed someone to their limits and they refused to break. My parents thought they'd taught me a lesson about reality. Instead, they'd created an artist with nothing left to lose and everything to prove. The plane lifted off Los Angeles, shrinking below, and I allowed myself a moment of pure, fierce joy. 6 months ago, I'd been homeless. Now I was flying first class. Ryan's team didn't do things halfway to perform for thousands. "You okay?" Ryan asked, settling into the seat beside me. He looked more relaxed than at our meeting, like leaving Los Angeles had lifted weight from his shoulders. "Just thinking about how strange life is," I said. 6 months ago, I was delivering Chinese food and sleeping in parking lots. Now, this. "Pain makes us who we are," he said quietly. "The trick is not letting it make us bitter. Your music, it's angry, but not bitter. That's rare. Hold on to that." As California disappeared behind us and the tour stretched ahead, I made a promise to myself. I would tell my story, all of it, the ugly parts and the beautiful ones. I would honor the girl who'd survived in that Honda Civic, who'd refused to surrender her dreams, even when her own family tried to kill them. And somewhere in Westchester, my parents would have to watch their discarded daughter rise without them. Their loss? I decided, pulling out my notebook to work on a new song, entirely their loss. Seattle's Paramount Theater rose before me like a cathedral of possibility, its vintage marquee announcing Ryan Walsh Acoustic Tour with my name in smaller letters below, special guest Kathleen Patterson. 3,000 seats waited in the darkness beyond the stage door, each one representing a person who'd paid money to experience live music. My music at least for 30 minutes. Sound check in 20, a production assistant called out, clipboard in hand, earpiece crackling with communications from the tech crew. The backstage area hummed with controlled chaos as equipment was positioned, lights focused, and instruments tuned. I stood in my assigned dressing room. A real dressing room with a mirror surrounded by bulbs and a small bathroom attached, trying to process the magnitude of change. 6 months earlier, I'd been counting quarters for gas money. Now a makeup artist named Becca was debating which shade of lipstick would look best under the stage lights. "You want to look like yourself, just elevated," she explained, working with practiced efficiency. Ryan's audiences appreciate authenticity. They can smell fake from the back row. Ryan appeared in my doorway as Becca finished. He'd transformed from the tired man at the chateau to a focused performer energy crackling around him like electricity. "Ready for sound check?" he asked. Fair warning, the empty theater is actually scarier than the full one. All those empty seats judge louder than occupied ones. He wasn't wrong. Walking onto that massive stage, seeing row after row of vacant seats ascending into darkness, my knees nearly buckled. The sound technician, a patient guy named Jerome, guided me through the process. "Play your loudest song first," he instructed through the monitors. "Then your quietest. We need to get your levels right." My voice echoed through the empty space, bouncing off ornate walls that had hosted legends. Bob Dylan had played here. Joni Mitchell. Now Kathleen Patterson, former homeless girl from Westchester, was adding her voice to that history. "Sounds good," Jerome announced after 30 minutes of adjustments. "You're all set." The hours between soundcheck and showtime stretched like taffy. I tried to eat the catered dinner but managed only a few bites. Patricia found me pacing in my dressing room at 7:30. "First night nerves are normal," she said, her usual brisk efficiency softened with unexpected kindness. "Ryan threw up before his first major show. Happened right in the wings. He still went out and killed it." "Did he tell 3,000 people about his family abandoning him?" I asked, reapplying lipstick with shaking hands. "No," she admitted, "but he told them other truths. That's what music is, truth wrapped in melody. You've got this." At 7:55, I stood in the wings, clutching my guitar. The crowd's energy was palpable, a living thing that pressed against the curtains. The lights dimmed, and the production manager gave me the nod. This was it. The walk to center stage felt both endless and instant. The spotlight hit me like a physical force, blinding me to the audience beyond. For a moment, panic clawed at my throat. Then I remembered all those nights playing for drunk patrons who weren't listening, singing in my car to stay sane, performing through exhaustion and hunger. If I could do that, I could do this. "Good evening, Seattle," I said into the microphone, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. "I'm Kathleen Patterson, and I'm here to tell you some stories." I opened with Midnight Shift, a song about finding dignity in minimum wage work. The opening chords rang out clear and true, and suddenly the fear evaporated. This was just me and my guitar, and the truth same as always. The only difference was scale. The audience was quiet at first, feeling me out, but by the second chorus, I could sense them leaning in, connecting with lyrics about sacrifice and survival. Applause at the song's end was warm, encouraging. I was winning them over one truth at a time. A year ago, I said tuning for the next song. I was living in my car. I'd been accepted to music school, but my parents decided my dreams weren't worth investing in. They paid for my siblings' education, but told me the money had run out when it was my turn. That was a lie. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Someone shouted, "That's messed up." Yeah, I agreed, finding my confidence. It was. But here's what I learned sleeping in parking lots and showering at 24-hour gyms. Sometimes the family that abandons you is doing you a favor. They're showing you who you really are when you can't rely on anyone else. I launched into Empty Promises, the song that had started everything. This time performing it felt different. Not like bleeding on stage, but like cleaning a wound. The pain was still there, but it had transformed into something powerful. The audience was mine now, completely absorbed. They gave me $1,000 when they kicked me out. I continued after the song, said it was more than I deserved. I still have that check. Never cashed it. I keep it as a reminder that some things cost more than they're worth. The set flew by. 30 minutes that changed everything. Each song was a piece of my journey from desperation to determination. The audience laughed when I told them about mistaking a security guard for a talent scout at 2 a.m. They fell silent during Walmart bathroom blues about maintaining dignity in undignified circumstances. By the time I closed with Rising Anyway, an anthem about succeeding without support, they were on their feet. Thank you for listening, I said, overwhelmed by their response. Thank you for seeing me. I floated off stage on a wave of applause straight into Ryan's arms. He hugged me quickly, professionally, but his eyes were bright with approval. That, he said, was how you open a show. Now watch and learn how to close one. I watched from the wings as Ryan commanded the stage for 2 hours, mesmerizing thousands with his vulnerability and virtuosity. But several times during his set, I caught people in the front rows checking their phones, and my name was trending on Twitter. Just saw Kathleen Patterson open for Ryan Walsh. Where has she been hiding? One tweet read, the opener made me cry 3 times in 30 minutes. What is this sorcery? Read another. Videos were already circulating shaky phone footage of me telling my story, singing my truth. The betrayal song had gone viral once before. Now it had context, a face, a voice that refused to be silenced. After the show, there was a small meet and greet with VIP ticket holders. I wasn't supposed to be included, but several people specifically asked to meet me. One woman, probably my mother's age, gripped my hands with tears in her eyes. My parents did the same thing, she whispered. Told me art wasn't practical. I gave up. You didn't. Thank you for showing it's possible. That night in my hotel room, a real hotel room with clean sheets and room service, I lay awake processing what had happened. My phone buzzed constantly with notifications. The videos were spreading. Marcus had texted 17 times in all caps. The EP pre-sales were climbing. But it was a single email that stopped me cold. The sender was a name I recognized from my research months ago, Grace Morrison, A&R director at Atlantic Records. Caught your Seattle show. We should talk. Are you free tomorrow before Portland? I stared at those 3 sentences until my eyes burned. Atlantic Records, major label, the kind of opportunity I dreamed about at Berkeley before my world imploded. I forwarded it to Marcus with shaking fingers. His response was immediate. Holy shit! Say yes, I'll handle the details. Portland's venue was smaller, only 1,800 seats, but the energy was even more intense. Word had spread overnight. People weren't just there for Ryan anymore. They were there for the full experience. My merchandise, hastily printed t-shirts with Rising Anyway across the front, sold out before doors opened. This is insane, Jenna said over the phone between shows. The EP hasn't even officially dropped, and it's already charting on iTunes. Your story is everywhere. Have you looked at social media? I hadn't. I was afraid to. Afraid of finding my family's response, afraid of seeing their attempts to control the narrative. But curiosity won. I opened Twitter to find thousands of mentions, Instagram to see fan art already emerging. And then buried in the noise, a verified account I recognized my brother David. Some family matters should remain private, His tweet read, "Disappointed to see my sister choosing publicity over discretion." The comments beneath tore him apart. Screenshots of my story were everywhere, and public opinion had rendered its verdict. But seeing his words still stung. Even now, even after everything, they couldn't just let me have this. Ryan found me staring at my phone before the Portland show. "Don't," he said simply, "don't let them in your head right before you perform. They've taken enough from you. Don't give them tonight, too." He was right. I blocked David, then Sarah, then my parents' accounts I'd found. Marcus, for good measure, though he'd been smart enough not to post anything. Yet. This was my story to tell my pain, to transform my success, to claim. Vancouver was magical. Toronto was electric. Night after night, I refined my performance, learned to read crowds, discovered the power of silence between songs. Ryan became an unexpected mentor, sharing wisdom earned through years of touring. The danger, he warned over late-night diner food in Chicago, is believing you need the pain to create. Don't fall into that trap. Success doesn't mean you have to forgive them, but it also doesn't mean you have to keep bleeding for art. By the time we hit New York playing the Beacon Theater, I was a different performer than the terrified girl in Seattle. Media requests poured in. Morning shows wanted interviews. Music bloggers dissected my lyrics. The EP had officially released and climbed charts with a speed that left Marcus speechless. But it was the message from Mrs. Chen at the Songbird Cafe that meant the most, watching you on the morning news. So proud. Your regular table is waiting whenever you need it. Grace Morrison met me in person before the Los Angeles show at the Greek Theater. She was everything I'd imagined a major label executive would be. Polished, direct, and surprisingly warm. "I've been in this business 20 years, she said over coffee in my hotel suite. I had a suite, now a fact that still didn't compute. "I've seen manufactured sob stories and authentic struggle. Yours is the latter. That's rare. That's valuable." What exactly are you offering?" Marcus asked. He'd flown in for this meeting protective as a mother bear. Full album deal, major distribution, tour support, marketing budget that would make your current situation look like a lemonade stand. She slid a folder across the table. "This is preliminary, but I think you'll find it attractive." The numbers made my head swim. Not millions, but hundreds of thousands. Enough to never sleep in a car again. Enough to prove definitively that my parents' investment in my siblings had been the lesser bet. "I need time," I said, my voice steady despite the magnitude of the moment. "Of course," Grace smiled. "Take the time you need, but not too much. Momentum is everything in this business." The Greek Theater show in Los Angeles was sold out, 5,700 people under the stars. Industry executives, celebrities, and music journalists packed the venue. This wasn't just another tour stop. This was a showcase in the entertainment capital of the world. My 30-minute set had been extended to 45 minutes at Ryan's insistence. "You've earned it," he'd said. "Besides, my team tells me ticket sales spiked after you were confirmed. They're coming to see both of us now." I was adjusting my guitar strap in the green room when security knocked. "Ms. Patterson, there are some people here claiming to be your family. They have tickets, but are insisting on backstage access." My blood froze. I knew this moment would come eventually, but I'd imagined it differently. Maybe a phone call first or a letter through lawyers. Not them showing up at my biggest performance yet. "They don't get backstage," I said firmly. "They can watch from their seats like everyone else." Patricia appeared, her expression grim. "They're making a scene at will call. Your mother is telling anyone who'll listen that she's your mom showing baby pictures on her phone. Security's getting nervous." Of course. They couldn't let me have even this without trying to center themselves. I thought about ignoring it, letting security handle them, but something in me snapped. If they wanted a confrontation, they'd get one. "Bring them to the VIP area," I said. "Not backstage, but the roped-off section by catering. I'll deal with them there." Patricia raised an eyebrow but nodded. "You sure?" They're going to keep escalating until they get what they want. Better to control when and where. 10 minutes later, I walked into the VIP area to find my entire family dressed like they were attending a charity gala. My mother wore a designer dress I recognized from her favorite boutique. My father sported a new Rolex. Sarah clutched a Chanel bag while David and Marcus flanked their parents like bodyguards. Kathleen, my mother moved forward as if to embrace me. I stepped back, maintaining distance. Don't, I warned. You don't get to do that. Is this really necessary? My father's voice carried the same condescending tone I remembered. This public hostility. We're your family. No, I said clearly. Family doesn't lie about money being gone when it's sitting in accounts. Family doesn't throw you out for choosing music over accounting. Family doesn't watch you leave with nothing but judgment. You're being dramatic, Sarah interjected, every inch the lawyer. We came to support you. Isn't that what you wanted? Recognition? I wanted parents who believed in me, I shot back. What I got was a $1,000 check and a message that I was no longer your daughter. Marcus shifted uncomfortably. He looked older, no longer the cocky high school athlete. Maybe seeing his name trending negatively online had given him perspective. Look, David tried his reasonable voice, the one he probably used with difficult patience. We all said things we regret, but you're successful now. Can't we move past this? Interesting how you want to move past it now that I'm successful, I observed. Where was this reconciliation energy when I was showering at truck stops? We didn't know, my mother protested, and for a second, she almost sounded believable. If we'd known you were struggling that much. You gave me an ultimatum, I reminded her. Follow your plan or leave with nothing. I left. What did you think would happen? We thought you'd come to your senses. My father said, his mask finally slipping. A few weeks of reality and you'd come home ready to be reasonable. There it was. The truth they'd never speak publicly. They'd expected me to fail, to come crawling back defeated and willing to accept whatever life they prescribed. My success wasn't just unexpected. It was an insult to their worldview. I need you to leave, I said quietly. You can watch from your seats if you want, but we're done here. The media is watching, my mother hissed, gesturing to where photographers lingered at the edges of the VIP area. Do you really want to be known as the girl who rejected her family? I want to be known as the girl who survived her family, I corrected, who succeeded despite them, who refused to let their limitations define her possibilities. Security had moved closer, ready to escort them out, but my mother had one more card to play. We're suing you, she announced, for defamation, for emotional distress, for violating our privacy. Our lawyer says we have a strong case. I laughed, actually laughed. It felt good, like releasing poison from my system. Sue me, I said. Please. I'd love to present evidence in court. Bank statements showing the money you claimed was gone, the Florida property records, the education accounts you set up for everyone but me. Bring it on. Sarah grabbed our mother's arm. Even she knew this was a losing battle. The court of public opinion had already ruled, and actual court would be worse. If you continue this vendetta, my father tried one last threat. You'll have no family left. I haven't had a family since my 18th birthday, I replied. I've just finally accepted it. They left then, security forming a subtle barrier to guide them away. My mother looked back once, and for a moment I saw something that might have been regret. Or maybe it was just anger at losing control of the narrative. Patricia appeared at my elbow. You okay? Better than okay, I realized. I faced them. I didn't crumble. I didn't give in. Good. Because you're on in 20 and there's something else. She held up her phone. That whole confrontation, someone live-streamed it. It's already going viral. My stomach dropped. This was supposed to be my big night, my Los Angeles triumph. Now it would be overshadowed by family drama. Hey, Ryan had materialized beside me. I just watched the stream. You were magnificent, calm, clear, honest. You didn't let them bait you into ugliness. That's strength. But the show, We'll be even more powerful because of it, he insisted. Those people out there, they just watched you stand up to your family in real time. They're invested now. They're rooting for you even harder. He was right. When I took the stage, the roar was deafening. Signs had appeared in the audience. Chosen family over blood family, and success is the best revenge, and simply, we believe in you, Kathleen. So, I said into the microphone once the noise died down, my family just tried to crash my biggest show. Anyone else having a complicated night? The audience laughed, but it was warm, supportive. They were with me. Here's what I know. I continued finding my rhythm. Some people will never celebrate your success if it doesn't match their definition of achievement. Some people will try to tear you down right when you're learning to fly. And sometimes those people share your DNA, but that doesn't mean they get to share your future. I played like I'd never played before. Every song was a declaration, every note a promise to myself and everyone who'd been told they weren't enough. The live stream had added an unexpected rawness to the night, stripping away any pretense. This wasn't just a performance anymore. It was an exorcism. During Empty Promises, I spotted them in the audience. They hadn't left after all, secured in their expensive seats, forced to watch their discarded daughter command the Greek theater. I sang directly to them, for one verse pouring every ounce of pain and triumph into the lyrics. My mother looked away. My father's jaw was set in a rigid line. But Marcus was crying. The set ended with a standing ovation that lasted so long, Ryan had to come out and joke about stealing his show. But before I left the stage, I had one more thing to say. That check my parents gave me when they kicked me out, the $1,000 that was more than I deserved, I'm auctioning it for charity tonight. Every penny goes to organizations supporting young artists whose families don't believe in them. Because every dream deserves a chance, even if your blood doesn't think so. The response was electric. By the time I left the stage, the bidding was at $20,000. Backstage was chaos. Reporters wanted statements. Marcus was fielding calls from every major label. Patricia was managing interview requests, but I found a quiet corner and called Mrs. Chen. "I'm watching online," she said without preamble. "That was beautiful, dear. Painful, but beautiful. Are you all right?" "I think so," I said, surprising myself by meaning it. I thought seeing them would break me, but it just made me realize how far I've come. "Pain can be a teacher if we let it," she said sagely. "You've learned well. Now come home and tell me everything. Your table is waiting." Grace Morrison from Atlantic Records found me as I was packing up. "That was unexpected," she said, "but it was also the most authentic thing I've seen in years. The offer stands, Kathleen. In fact, I'm prepared to increase it." She named a number that made my knees weak. Not just album funding, but tour support, creative control, and a signing bonus that would ensure I'd never sleep in a car again. "Can I bring my team?" I asked, thinking of Marcus and Jenna and everyone at Riverside who'd believed in me when I had nothing. "Of course, we'd be investing in your whole vision, not trying to change it." As the Greek theater emptied and the stars came out over Los Angeles, I stood on the empty stage for a moment. 6 months ago, I'd been invisible, struggling to survive. Now I had major labels bidding for my signature fans who connected with my truth, and a story that resonated with anyone who'd ever been told their dreams didn't matter. My phone buzzed. Sarah had texted from a number I hadn't blocked yet. "Marcus wants to apologize. Can he have your number?" I thought about it, then typed back, "He can email Marcus at Riverside Records. If it's genuine, we can talk." Maybe there was room for redemption for some of them at least, but it would be on my terms now, not theirs. The night air was cool on my face as I walked to the tour bus. Tomorrow we'd be in Phoenix, then Denver, then city after city, of people ready to hear songs born from pain, but delivered with hope. My family had given me a story. Now I was turning it into a legacy. And that $1,000 check, it sold for $57,000, to a tech executive who'd been disowned for dropping out of law school to start a company. He said he wanted to frame it as a reminder that sometimes the best thing your family can do for you is show you who they really are. I couldn't agree more. The confrontation at the Greek theater had been live-streamed by an audience member, and within 48 hours it had been viewed 12 million times. News outlets picked up the story dissecting every moment of my interaction with my family. The footage was clear them in their designer clothes, demanding access me standing my ground with quiet dignity. Public opinion was overwhelmingly on my side, but my parents weren't going down without a fight. It started 3 days later in Phoenix. I was having breakfast in my hotel when Patricia burst in tablet in hand, face grim. "They did an interview," she said without preamble. "Good morning, America. Your parents sitting on a cream-colored couch playing the victims." I set down my coffee carefully. "Show me." The segment was 8 minutes of carefully crafted manipulation. My mother dabbed at her eyes with a tissue, while my father held her hand supportively. They'd brought photo albums, home videos, carefully curated evidence of what appeared to be a loving family. "We don't understand where this anger comes from," my mother told the host, her voice trembling with practiced emotion. "We sacrificed everything for our children. Yes, we made difficult financial decisions, but Kathleen is twisting the truth for publicity. She was always dramatic." My father added the concerned parent act polished to perfection. "We tried to guide her toward stability. Music is a beautiful hobby, but we wanted her to have a real career first. Was that so wrong?" The host, to her credit, pushed back slightly. "But you did pay for your other children's education. Why not Kathleen's?" "The timing was different," my mother said smoothly. "The 2008 financial crisis hit us hard. By the time Kathleen graduated, we simply didn't have the resources we'd had before. We offered her alternatives, but she wanted Berkeley or nothing." Lies wrapped in half-truths, presented with just enough genuine emotion to seem believable. They'd learned from the live-stream debacle. This time, they'd come prepared with a narrative. "There's more," Patricia said, swiping to another video. "Your siblings did a podcast, The Other Side of the Story, they're calling it." For an hour, Sarah and David dissected our childhood, painting me as the difficult middle child who'd never been satisfied. They shared anecdotes stripped of context, making my teenage frustration sound like ingratitude. Marcus was notably absent from their revisionist history. "She once said she wished she'd been born into a different family," Sarah told the podcast host, "at her own birthday dinner. Can you imagine how that felt for our parents?" She conveniently left out that I'd said it after they'd spent my 16th birthday party talking about Sarah's law school applications instead of acknowledging my state music competition win. "They're trying to control the narrative," Ryan said when I called him. He was already in Denver preparing for that night's show. "Classic damage control. How do you want to handle it?" "I don't know," I admitted. "Part of me wants to release everything, bank statements, recordings, emails, prove they're lying, but part of me just wants to focus on the music." "Both are valid," he said. "But remember, you already won. You're on tour, your EP is climbing charts, Atlantic wants to sign you. They're grasping at relevance." He was right, but it still stung. Watching my family rewrite history for morning show audiences felt like being gaslit on a national scale. My phone buzzed constantly with interview requests, everyone wanting my response to their response. "No comment" became my mantra, even as my parents' media tour continued. They showed up on talk shows with childhood photos painting themselves as heartbroken parents abandoned by an ungrateful daughter. They started a blog called "When Love Isn't Enough, A Parent's Perspective," full of vague posts about difficult children and the pain of estrangement. They even announced they were writing a book about raising a child who chooses fame over family. "They're grifting off your success," Marcus, my manager, not my brother, said during a strategy call, "trying to make themselves relevant by association. We could send a cease and desist." "No," I decided. "Let them talk. The more they speak, the more people see through them. I was right. The comments on their interviews were brutal. People who'd followed my story from the beginning weren't buying the concerned parent act. Screenshots of my live-streamed confrontation were posted under every article about their heartbreak, reminding audiences of their designer clothes and lawsuit threats. But they escalated further. A week into their media tour, legal documents arrived at Riverside Records. They were actually suing me. Defamation, emotional distress, and misappropriation of family story for commercial gain. This is ridiculous, the label's lawyers said, reviewing the filing. They'd have to prove your statements were false, which would require opening their financial records. No competent lawyer would actually pursue this. Unless the point isn't to win, I realized, it's to drain me. Legal fees, time, emotional energy. They want to punish me for succeeding without them. The lawsuit made headlines, of course. Family Feud parents sue daughter over tell-all tour, screamed the tabloids. My Instagram was flooded with messages of support, but also with trolls who'd bought into my parents' victim narrative. Sarah went on a legal podcast to discuss the case, careful not to violate any professional ethics, while still painting me as a vindictive daughter, weaponizing my pain for profit. She wore her Harvard Law sweatshirt, subtly reminding everyone of the education our parents had paid for while denying me mine. As family disputes should be handled privately, she said with practiced authority. Taking private pain public for monetary gain raises serious ethical questions. The irony of her saying this on a podcast she was probably being paid for wasn't lost on anyone with critical thinking skills. David took a different approach, writing op-eds about the mental health crisis in the music industry and how fame-seeking behavior can destroy families. He never mentioned me by name, but the subtext was clear. The successful doctor's son concerned about his sister's delusions of grandeur. Meanwhile, I was playing to sold-out crowds every night. The tour was magic, each show stronger than the last. Fans held up signs saying, "Your real family is here," and "Blood doesn't equal love." They shared their own stories of family rejection of dreams, dismissed of success, achieved despite those who should have supported them. But the legal harassment took its toll. I was served with papers in Denver, subpoenaed for depositions in Dallas, threatened with injunctions in Atlanta. Each show now came with meetings with local lawyers, strategizing how to respond to the latest filing. "They're trying to break you," Patricia observed after a particularly grueling conference call. "Make the success not worth the pain." "Joke's on them," I said, exhausted but determined. "They already taught me how to function through pain. This is just a different venue." The breaking point came in Nashville. I was backstage preparing for soundcheck when security informed me there were process servers at every entrance. My parents had filed for an emergency injunction to stop me from performing any songs that referenced family matters. "They can't do that," Ryan said, furious on my behalf. "That's prior restraint. No judge would grant it." But they'd timed it perfectly. The show was in 3 hours. Even if the injunction was baseless, I'd have to scramble to respond, disrupting my pre-show routine. It was psychological warfare disguised as legal action. I made a decision. "Get me a camera," I told Patricia. "What are you doing?" "Ending this my way." We set up in my dressing room. No makeup, no staging, just me and my exhaustion and my truth. I went live on Instagram, watching the viewer count climb rapidly. "My parents are currently trying to legally prevent me from singing songs about my own life," I said simply. "They've filed lawsuits, given interviews, written blogs, all to control a narrative where they're victims of an ungrateful daughter. So let me be clear, every word I've said is true. They had the money. They chose not to spend it on my education because they didn't believe in my dreams. They gave me an ultimatum and threw me out when I wouldn't comply. I have the receipts, literal receipts, but I'm not going to play their game anymore." I held up a folder. "This contains every piece of evidence that proves my story. Bank statements, emails, recordings of conversations where they plan to use my college fund for retirement property. My lawyer will be releasing these to respond to their lawsuit, but after today, I'm done talking about them. They want attention. They want to be part of my story. Too bad. They wrote themselves out of it the day they changed the locks. The viewer count had passed 100,000. Comments flooded in faster than I could read. To anyone whose family doesn't believe in them, I continued, you are not obligated to keep toxic people in your life just because you share DNA. You are not required to dim your light because it makes them uncomfortable. And you sure as hell don't need their permission to tell your own story. I ended the stream and handed the folder to Patricia. Give this to the lawyers. Full disclosure. Let them explain the receipts in court. That night's show in Nashville was electric. The injunction was denied, of course. No judge was going to prevent someone from singing autobiographical songs. I performed with a rawness that left the audience breathless. During Empty Promises, I changed the lyrics slightly. You can sue me, you can slander, you can cry on morning shows, but I'm done seeking approval from people I've outgrown. The crowd went wild. Videos of that performance would circulate for years. But the most unexpected moment came after the show. Marcus, my brother, not my manager, was waiting by the tour buses, alone, no parents or siblings in sight, looking younger than his 19 years. I know you probably don't want to see me. He started, hands shoved in his pockets, but I had to try. Security looked to me for direction. I nodded for them to let him through. You've got 5 minutes. I said, not unkindly, but not warmly either. I'm sorry, he said simply. I was a jerk. I knew what they were doing was wrong, and I benefited from it, and I said nothing. Watching you these past months, seeing you succeed despite everything, it made me realize what cowards we all were. Why now, I asked. Why speak up now? Because I can't stand watching them try to destroy you for telling the truth, he said, tears in his eyes. And because I miss my sister, the real one, not the version they're trying to create in interviews. I studied him for a long moment. He seemed genuine, but I'd learned not to trust Patterson tears. Email Marcus at Riverside, I finally said. We can talk. But Marcus, if this is some ploy, if they sent you... They didn't, he insisted. They don't even know I'm here. I'm done being their puppet. Time would tell if he meant it. But as the tour buses pulled away from Nashville, heading toward the next city and the next show, I felt something shift. The lawsuit would continue. My parents were nothing if not persistent. The media would keep circling. But I was done giving them power over my peace. They could have their interviews and their blogs and their book deals. I had my music, my truth, and an audience that believed in both. They taught me to survive without them. Now I was teaching myself to thrive despite them. And that $1,000 check they'd given me, the one that sold for $57,000 at auction. The buyer had it framed with a plaque that read, "Sometimes the smallest gestures reveal the biggest truths." He donated it to be displayed at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in their section on artists who overcame adversity. My parents' final payment to me had become a monument to their own failure. There was poetry in that, the kind you couldn't write in a song, but life sometimes delivered anyway. December arrived with a phone call that changed everything. I was back in Los Angeles in the small apartment I'd rented with my Atlantic Records advance when Grace Morrison called at 6 a.m. "Kathleen, are you sitting down?" Her voice vibrated with excitement. "I'm still in bed," I mumbled, barely awake. "Perfect. You've been nominated for 5 Grammys. Best New Artist Album of the Year for the full-length We Rushed Out Record of the Year for Empty Promises, Song of the Year, and Best Pop Solo Performance." I sat bolt upright, suddenly completely alert. That's not possible. The album just came out 2 months ago. It made the eligibility cutoff by 3 days, she explained. The Academy was impressed. "Kathleen, this is huge. You're the most nominated new artist this year." The room spun around me. Grammys. 5 Grammy nominations. A year ago, I'd been sleeping in my car behind an abandoned strip mall. Now I was competing for music's highest honors. The nominations go public in an hour, Grace continued. We need to prepare a statement. Media requests are going to explode. She wasn't wrong. By 7 a.m., my phone was unusable from the constant notifications. Every major outlet wanted interviews. My Instagram follower count jumped by 2 million in 3 hours. Her Kathleen Patterson was trending worldwide. Marcus, my manager, called from New York where he was negotiating my next tour. Holy shit, Kathleen, 5. Do you understand what this means? I'm trying to process it, I said, still staring at the official nomination list Grace had sent. This changes everything. Venue sizes, ticket prices, endorsement deals. You're not just a viral story anymore. You're a Grammy-nominated artist. The legitimacy this brings is invaluable. But I knew what else it would bring. And sure enough, by noon, my family had mobilized their response. The first salvo came from Sarah on Twitter. Proud of my sister's Grammy nominations. Despite our differences, family is family. Hope this recognition brings healing. It was masterfully crafted, taking credit while appearing magnanimous. The replies were split between people calling out her hypocrisy and others praising her for extending an olive branch. My parents took a different approach. They appeared on a morning talk show within 48 hours somehow, securing a booking that typically took weeks to arrange. They'd prepared a slick presentation. We always knew Kathleen was talented, my mother said, wearing the same expression she used when her real estate deals closed. We may have disagreed on timing and approach, but we never doubted her gift. These nominations validate what we've always said, my father added. Kathleen is exceptional. We just wanted her to have stability before pursuing such a challenging career. The host, thankfully, wasn't buying it entirely. But you sued her just 6 months ago for defamation. A misunderstanding blown out of proportion by lawyers. My mother deflected. We've since withdrawn the lawsuit. Family disputes shouldn't play out in courtrooms. That was news to me. I quickly texted my lawyer, who confirmed they'd quietly dropped the suit 2 weeks prior, probably anticipating something like this. They wanted to rehabilitate their image in time to bask in my reflected glory. They're shameless, Patricia said when we met to discuss Grammy Week strategy, but predictable. What do you want to do? Nothing, I decided. They want me to react to give them more fuel. I'm done playing their game. Instead, I focused on the music. The Grammy performance slots were highly coveted, and the producers wanted me to perform empty promises. We spent weeks planning a stripped-down arrangement that would highlight the song's emotional core. But my family wasn't done. A week before the Grammys, a package arrived at my apartment. No return address, but I recognized my mother's handwriting. Inside was a jewelry box containing my grandmother's diamond necklace, a family heirloom I'd loved as a child. The accompanying note read, "This was always meant for you. Wear it to the Grammys and know we're proud. Mom." I stared at the necklace, remembering how my grandmother had let me try it on when I was 7, promising it would be mine someday. It was a beautiful piece Art Deco design with perfect clarity stones. It was also a trap. If I wore it, they'd claim credit for supporting me, probably with a perfectly timed Instagram post about family traditions. If I didn't, they'd paint me as petty, rejecting a sentimental gesture. I called Mrs. Chen for advice. She listened patiently, then said, "What would your grandmother want?" "Oh, she'd want me to wear it," I admitted. "She never liked how my parents treated me. She used to say I had the music gene from her side of the family." "Then wear it for her, not them," she suggested, "and tell that story, not theirs." It was perfect advice. When Grammy Week arrived, I wore the necklace to every event, and when asked about it, I talked about my grandmother's love of music, how she'd played piano in jazz clubs before marriage, how she'd been the only family member to encourage my dreams before she passed. The narrative shift was subtle but effective. The necklace became about honoring the one family member who'd believed in me, not about reconciling with those who hadn't. Grammy week was a whirlwind. Rehearsals, interviews, parties, and gifting suites. Other artists I'd admired for years now treated me as a peer. Ryan Walsh, who'd become a genuine friend, was also nominated and made sure I didn't get overwhelmed by the circus. "Your first Grammys is like your first tour," he advised over lunch between rehearsals. "Exciting, terrifying, and over before you can process it. Try to stay present." 3 days before the ceremony, Marcus, my brother, reached out through official channels. He'd been emailing with my manager for months, proving his sincerity through consistency. He wanted to attend the ceremony. "Not with them," he clarified, over a carefully supervised coffee meeting. "Just me. I want to be there for you, not for the cameras or the family image." I studied him across the table. He'd changed in the months since Nashville. The cockiness was gone, replaced by something quieter. He'd started therapy, he told me, trying to understand his role in our family dynamics. "I benefited from their favoritism," he said simply. "I knew it was wrong, but I was selfish. I'm trying to be better." "One ticket," I finally agreed. "Just you. And Marcus. If I see a single social media post, if you give one interview, if you try to speak for me in any way, we're done." "Understood," he said. "I'll be invisible, just a proud brother in the crowd." The day before the Grammys disaster nearly struck. A video surfaced posted by someone who'd been at my high school. It showed a teenage me having a screaming match with my parents after a school concert taken out of context to make me look like an ungrateful brat. My parents denied releasing it, but the timing was suspicious. Within hours, they were on entertainment news shows, reluctantly discussing my troubled teen years and their attempts to provide structure. "She was so angry," my mother said, dabbing at her eyes. "We tried everything. Therapy, family counseling. Nothing worked." All lies. There had been no therapy, no counseling, just their disappointment that I wouldn't conform. But the damage was done. The narrative was shifting, painting me as a difficult child who'd rewritten history for sympathy. I was furious, pacing my apartment, ready to release every receipt, every piece of evidence I'd held back. But Jenna from Riverside called with different advice. Make music," she said simply. "You're a musician. That's your language. Say what you need to say through your art." That night, I wrote a new verse for Empty Promises, one that would only be performed once at the Grammys, a verse that told the truth without descending to their level. Grammy night arrived in a blur of preparation. The red carpet was surreal. Designers had sent dresses, professionals did my hair and makeup, and suddenly I was walking the same carpet as legends. My grandmother's necklace caught the light with every camera flash. "Who are you wearing?" reporters asked. "The dress is Versace," I answered. "The necklace was my grandmother's. She played jazz piano in the 40s and was the first person to tell me I had music in my blood." Inside the arena, I found my seat, front section among the nominees. Marcus was somewhere in the upper levels, keeping his promise to stay invisible. As the show began, my phone vibrated with a text from him. "Gran would be so proud. You look like her when she played the Cotton Club." He'd attached a photo I'd never seen. My grandmother at a piano, wearing the same necklace lost in the music. I blinked back, tears, grateful for waterproof mascara. The show moved at lightning speed. Awards were announced, performances dazzled, and then it was time for Best New Artist. They showed clips of all the nominees, and when my face appeared on the massive screens, the audience erupted. The journey from homeless to here resonated. "And the Grammy goes to," the presenter paused for effect, "Kathleen Patterson." The world stopped. Then Ryan was pulling me to my feet, and I was walking to the stage in a daze. The trophy was heavier than I'd imagined. I looked out at thousands of faces, all waiting for me to speak. "A year and a half ago, I was sleeping in my car." I began, my voice steady, despite my racing heart. My family had told me that music wasn't a real career, that my dreams weren't worth investing in. They gave me $1,000 and told me it was more than I deserved. I found Marcus in the crowd, saw him wiping his eyes. But sometimes the family that raises you isn't the family that raises you up, I continued. This award belongs to everyone who believed in me when my blood didn't. To Mrs. Chen at the Songbird Cafe, who saved me a table when I had nowhere else to go. To Marcus Chen at Riverside, who took a chance on a girl with nothing but pain and a guitar. To Ryan Walsh, who showed me how to turn hurt into art. And to my grandmother who played jazz when women weren't supposed to, who gave me this necklace and the music gene and the belief that dreams matter. I held up the Grammy. They gave me $1,000 and told me to disappear. Instead, I became undeniable. To everyone whose family doesn't believe in them, become undeniable. The standing ovation lasted forever. When I finally made it backstage, clutching my Grammy, Patricia was fielding calls. My parents had already released a statement taking partial credit. My siblings had posted throwback photos. The whole machinery of their manipulation was in motion. But it didn't matter anymore. I had the trophy. I had the truth. And when I performed Empty Promises, later in the show with that new verse that cut through their lies with surgical precision, I had 3 more standing ovations. By the end of the night, I had won 3 of my 5 nominations. Best New Artist Song of the Year and Best Pop Solo Performance. 3 Grammys in one night. From homeless to history in 18 months. The after-party calls came immediately. Every major artist wanted to collaborate. Labels were circling with bigger offers. My team was ecstatic, planning world tours and stadium shows. But I slipped away from the official party's early meeting Marcus at a quiet bar in West Hollywood. He was there as promised, no photos taken, no social media posted. Just my little brother proud and trying to make amends. "I'm sorry they tried to sabotage tonight," he said quietly. "I didn't know about the video, I swear." "I know," I said and meant it. "You're not them, Marcus. You're choosing to be different." We talked until 3 in the morning. About family patterns, about breaking cycles, about the difference between blood and love. He showed me texts from our parents, furious that he'd attended without them, threatening his own college funding. "Let them," he said. "I'll figure it out. You did." Maybe there was hope for us yet. Not for the family we'd been, but for the relationship we might build. One conversation at a time, one truth at a time. As the sun rose over Los Angeles, I sat in my apartment holding 3 Grammys, wearing my grandmother's necklace, finally understanding something crucial. They'd tried to diminish me by giving me nothing. Instead, they'd given me everything. The hunger to succeed, the strength to survive, and a story that resonated with millions. Their $1,000 check, now hanging in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, had become a symbol of how wrong they'd been. And these 3 golden gramophones were proof that sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's becoming everything they said you'd never be. 2 weeks after the Grammys, I was in New York for a series of meetings with Atlantic Records about my second album when Patricia called with news that would change everything. "You need to see this," she said, her voice strange. "Can you come to my hotel? Bring your lawyer." An hour later, I sat in Patricia's suite at the Plaza, staring at a manila envelope marked Confidential, Patterson Family Financial Investigation. My lawyer, Janet Rodriguez, was reading through documents with increasingly wide eyes. "Where did this come from?" I asked. "A journalist named David Winters," Patricia explained. "He's been investigating your family for months. Started as a human interest piece about your Grammy wins, but he found irregularities." Janet looked up from the papers. "Kathleen, your parents are being investigated by the FBI for real estate fraud. Multiple clients, false documentations, embezzlement. This goes back years." The room tilted. "What?" "It appears." Janet continued flipping through pages. "They've been taking deposits from clients and moving money between accounts to cover shortfalls. Classic Ponzi behavior. The FBI estimates they've defrauded clients out of approximately $3 million over the past decade. I thought about their designer clothes at the Greek theater, the new Rolex, the Florida property they'd bought with my college fund. It all made horrible sense. There's more, Patricia said gently. The journalist found court documents. Your siblings all have trust funds from your grandparents, maternal and paternal, substantial ones. But yours was liquidated when you were 16. That's impossible, I said. I would have had to sign. They forged your signature, Janet interrupted, showing me the documents. Rather expertly, but forensic analysis confirmed it. The money, about $400,000, was moved into their business accounts. $400,000. My grandparents had left me $400,000 and my parents had stolen it. Why didn't they just use that for my college? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Because they'd already spent it, Janet said, covering bad investments, maintaining their lifestyle. By the time you were ready for college, it was gone. The other children's trusts were protected because they'd already turned 18 when your parents got desperate. I stood up, walked to the window, tried to process this information. Below New York churned on, oblivious to my world reshaping itself again. The journalist wants to interview you, Patricia said carefully. He's writing an exposé for Rolling Stone. With or without your participation, this story is coming out. I managed. He's aiming for next month's issue. But Kathleen, if the FBI arrests your parents before then? She didn't need to finish. If my parents were arrested, it would be front-page news immediately. My Grammy success would be forever linked to their criminal behavior. That night, unable to sleep, I made a decision. If the truth was coming out anyway, I'd tell it myself completely and honestly. No more holding back to protect people who'd never protected me. I called David Winters the next morning. He was thorough, professional, and surprisingly compassionate as he walked me through his findings. The evidence was overwhelming. My parents had been robbing Peter to pay Paul for years, using their children's college successes to maintain credibility while defrauding clients behind the scenes. Your college fund wasn't lost in a bad investment, he confirmed. It was used to pay back a client who'd threatened to sue. They chose to sacrifice your education to avoid exposure. And my siblings knew? I asked, though I dreaded the answer. Sarah knew, he said gently. We found emails between her and your parents discussing the situation with your trust fund. She was in law school, understood the implications, and said nothing. David was likely unaware, focused on medical school. Marcus was too young. I gave David a 3-hour interview, holding nothing back. The theft, the lies, the homelessness, the $1,000 check that still hung in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. But I also talked about the people who'd helped me, the strength I'd found in music, the unexpected beauty of building a life from nothing. I need to control this narrative, I told my team afterward, before it breaks, before they can spin it. We decided on a documentary, full transparency, all the documents, the complete story. I'd finance it myself with my Grammy winnings, maintaining creative control. We had 3 weeks before David's article would drop, 3 weeks to tell my truth definitively. The documentary crew followed me as I retraced my journey. We filmed at the Walmart, where I'd slept in my car, the Fit Life gym, where I'd worked midnight shifts. Mrs. Chen agreed to be interviewed at the Songbird Cafe, tears streaming as she recalled my lowest moments. She'd come in with such hollow eyes, she said to the camera, but when she sang, you could hear her soul fighting to survive. We interviewed the coffee shop workers who'd snuck me free food, the venue owners who'd paid me in cash when I desperately needed gas money, the other musicians who'd shared their meager tips. The story that emerged wasn't just about family betrayal, but about the kindness of strangers and the power of community. But the most powerful moment came when we accessed the storage unit my parents didn't know I knew about. Marcus, my brother, had tipped me off. Inside were boxes of documents they'd hidden, my original trust fund papers, emails discussing how to handle Kathleen, and most damning, a recording of a family meeting where they discussed their plan. The recording was from Marcus's phone taken secretly when he was 17. On it, you could hear my parents explaining why they couldn't pay for my college. "We need her to stay local," my mother's voice said clearly. "If she goes to Berkeley, she'll never come back, and we need someone to take care of us when we're older. It's a daughter's duty." But what about her trust fund? That was Marcus younger, but recognizable. "Already allocated," my father replied curtly. "She doesn't need to know about it. She'll thank us someday for keeping her grounded." The documentary editor nearly cried listening to it. "This is evil," she said simply. As we rushed to finish the documentary, word of the FBI investigation leaked. My parents were arrested on a Tuesday morning, charged with 23 counts of fraud. The footage of them being led away in handcuffs went viral within hours. My phone exploded with calls. Every news outlet wanted a statement. Instead, we released the documentary early, uploading it to YouTube and every major platform simultaneously. Empty promises. A daughter's story was 90 minutes of unvarnished truth. The response was immediate and overwhelming. 20 million views in the first 24 hours. The evidence was so comprehensive, so damning, that even my parents' most ardent defenders went silent. The $1,000 check featured prominently shown in its frame at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, but we also showed the $400,000 trust fund theft, the forged signatures, the calculated decision to sacrifice my education to cover their crimes. Sarah tried damage control, posting a lengthy Instagram statement about being manipulated by parents I trusted. But screenshots of her emails knowing about the theft destroyed her credibility. Her law firm placed her on administrative leave pending an ethics review. David stayed silent, which was probably smart. Marcus publicly supported the documentary, adding his own statement about the toxic family dynamics he was working to understand and overcome. But the most unexpected response came from extended family I'd never heard from. Cousins, aunts, uncles who'd been told I'd cut off the family for fame reached out with apologies and support. They'd been fed lies for years, painted a picture of me as an ungrateful diva. "We should have known," my mother's sister told me through tears on a video call. "When you were homeless and they were buying investment properties, we should have questioned their story." The Rolling Stone article dropped the following week, adding investigative depth to my personal narrative. David Winters had uncovered more victims, more lies, more evidence of my parents' systematic fraud, but he'd also found something beautiful. Stories from dozens of people I'd encountered during my homeless months who'd followed my journey and felt inspired to pursue their own dreams. My parents out on bail tried one last manipulation. They gave a jailhouse interview claiming I'd known about and benefited from their business dealings. The accusation was so absurd, so easily disproven by the timeline of my homelessness, that it only made them look more desperate. Their trial was set for the fall. I was listed as a witness, though my testimony would mostly involve confirming document authenticity. The real evidence was in the paper trail they'd been too arrogant to properly hide. In the midst of the chaos, my Grammy momentum continued. The documentary had only amplified public support. Album sales soared, tour offers poured in, but I found myself seeking quiet moments, processing the magnitude of what had been revealed. One evening, I sat with Ryan Walsh, who'd become one of my closest friends through all of this. We were writing together, working on a song about truth and its consequences. "How do you feel?" he asked during a break, "now that everyone knows everything?" "Free," I said without hesitation. For the first time in my life, completely free. No more secrets, no more protecting them, no more wondering if I was crazy for feeling betrayed. The truth is out, all of it. "And your music?" I thought about it. "It's changing. Less about pain, more about power. Less about what they took, more about what I built." The song we wrote that night, Truth Like Lightning would become the lead single from my second album. It opened with the sound of a gavel, a nod to justice served, before building into an anthem about the liberating power of honesty. But perhaps the most meaningful moment came a week later. I was in Los Angeles for meetings when I decided to visit the storage unit one more time. I wanted to properly archive the documents for the trial, ensure everything was preserved. In a box I'd overlooked before, I found letters from my grandmother. Not just one or two, but dozens written to me over the years, but never delivered. My parents had intercepted them all. In shaking handwriting, she'd encouraged my music-shared stories of her own performing days and repeatedly mentioned the trust fund she'd set up for my education. The final letter, dated a month before her death, was the most heartbreaking. My dearest Kathleen, I fear this letter, like the others, won't reach you, but I pray someday you'll know how much I believed in your gift. The money I've left is for your music education. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. You have the music gene, the true one. Use it to soar. All my love, Gran. I sat on the storage unit floor and cried. For the grandmother who'd tried to protect me, for the young woman who'd lived in her car, never knowing $400,000 had been stolen from her, for all the what-ifs that would never be answered. But mostly, I cried from relief. The truth was finally completely revealed. No more secrets, no more gaslighting, no more doubt. Just the harsh, clean light of reality. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus, my brother. Saw the news about the letters. I'm so sorry. Gran would be proud of who you've become. Maybe he was right. Maybe somehow, through all the betrayal and homelessness and struggle, I'd become exactly who she'd hoped I'd be. Not in spite of the hardship, but because of how I'd chosen to face it. The truth had set me free. Now it was time to fly. The federal courthouse in White Plains, New York became my second home during the trial preparation. As the key witness in my parents' fraud case, I spent countless hours with prosecutors going over evidence, timelines, and testimony. The FBI had built an airtight case, but my parents weren't going down without a fight. They'd hired Sterling and Associates, a high-profile defense firm known for taking on hopeless cases and creating reasonable doubt from thin air. The lead attorney, Richard Sterling himself, had successfully defended politicians, celebrities, and white-collar criminals for 3 decades. They're going to try to destroy you on the stand, Janet, my lawyer, warned during prep. Make you look vindictive, unreliable, motivated by fame and revenge. Are you ready for that? They already destroyed me once, I replied. I survived. I can handle whatever they throw at me. But first came my parents' counteroffensive. They sued me for defamation, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and, most audaciously, for the return of my grandmother's necklace, claiming it was a family heirloom obtained under false pretenses. They're trying to muddy the waters, Janet explained, create parallel narratives where they're both defendant and victim. Classic Sterling strategy. The civil suit meant depositions, and depositions meant sitting across from my parents for the first time since the Greek theater. They looked smaller than I remembered their designer clothes, unable to hide the stress of house arrest and asset freezing. State your name for the record, their lawyer began. Kathleen Patterson, I said clearly. For 6 hours, Sterling grilled me about every aspect of my story. He had photos from my childhood report cards, birthday cards I'd sent thanking my parents for gifts. He tried to paint a picture of a loving family destroyed by a daughter's ambition. Isn't it true you told your mother you hated her? He asked, producing a diary entry from when I was 14. I was a teenager who'd just been told I couldn't attend a music camp because my brother's basketball camp was more important. I responded, "Context matters." But you did write these words, "I hate her." Yes, I also wrote that I hated broccoli and geometry. Teenage diaries aren't legal documents. My mother smirked at that, a flash of the condescension I remembered so well. It strengthened my resolve. Sterling moved to my homeless period, trying to suggest I'd chosen that lifestyle for sympathy. "You had $1,000, he said. Enough for a deposit on a room. Why live in your car?" "Have you looked at rental prices versus minimum wage lately?" I shot back. That $1,000 had to cover food, gas, phone bills, everything. 1 month's rent would have depleted it entirely. "So you chose publicity over practicality." "I chose survival over starvation. There was no publicity. Nobody knew I was homeless until months later." The deposition revealed their strategy: paint me as calculating someone who'd crafted a sob story for success. But they'd underestimated how thoroughly documented my journey was. For every insinuation, I had receipts. Literally. The civil case was dismissed 2 weeks later, the judge calling it frivolous and vindictive. But the damage was done. The depositions were leaked, cherry-picked excerpts appearing on gossip sites. My teenage diary became fodder for think pieces about family dynamics in the spotlight. Sarah made things worse by going on a podcast to discuss the complex truth about Kathleen. She was always dramatic," Sarah said in full lawyer mode. "Every family conflict became a production. Yes, mistakes were made, but she's rewritten history for her narrative." The podcast host thankfully pushed back, but the FBI found evidence of fraud. The trust fund theft is documented. "I can't comment on ongoing legal matters," Sarah deflected. "I'm just saying there are two sides to every story." I was furious enough to break my silence, posting a simple response. "There aren't two sides to forged signatures and stolen trust funds. There's just the truth, and those who profit from denying it." The post went viral, but more importantly, it caught the attention of other victims. 3 families came forward with similar stories about my parents. Promised investments that disappeared, property deals that went sour, always with elaborate excuses and falsified documents. One woman, Maria Santos, reached out personally. She'd lost her life savings to my parents' schemes money meant for her daughter's cancer treatment. They'd promised doubled returns within 6 months. Instead, they'd used her money to pay off another angry client. I blamed myself for years, Maria told me over coffee. They were so convincing, so professional. Seeing your story gave me courage to speak up. Her testimony would prove crucial at trial. As autumn arrived, so did the criminal trial. United States versus Patterson became national news, not just because of my fame, but because it represented a larger story about fraud family and the American dream corrupted. I testified on day 3. The courtroom was packed with media victims and curious observers. My parents sat at the defense table wearing matching gray suits that made them look like what they were: alleged criminals trying to appear respectable. The prosecutor, ADA Jennifer Murphy, walked me through the evidence methodically. The trust fund documents, the forged signatures, the emails discussing how to handle me. Each piece built the case that my parents had systematically defrauded multiple victims, including their own daughter. "When did you learn about the trust fund?" she asked. 6 weeks ago, I replied, when investigators found the documents. "How did that discovery make you feel?" I looked directly at my parents, like my entire life had been built on lies. They stole $400,000 meant for my education, and then told me they had nothing to give. They watched me sleep in my car, knowing they'd taken my future. My mother's mask finally cracked. She whispered frantically to Sterling, who stood for cross-examination with the demeanor of a man about to perform surgery. "Miss Patterson," he began, "you're quite successful now, aren't you?" "I've been fortunate, yes. Multi-platinum album, sold-out tours, endorsement deals. Would you say your career has benefited from your story of hardship?" I saw the trap but walked into it anyway. My music connects with people because it's honest about pain and survival. "So you'd agree that your family conflict has been professionally advantageous?" My family's betrayal nearly destroyed me. The fact that I survived and found success doesn't make their actions acceptable. He shifted tactics, producing financial records. These documents show your parents paid for music lessons, instruments, competition fees throughout your childhood. Thousands of dollars invested in your talent. Does that sound like parents who didn't believe in you? It sounds like parents who supported a hobby until it threatened to become a career, I countered. They were happy to have a talented daughter to brag about at parties. They just didn't want that daughter to actually pursue her talent professionally. Or perhaps they wanted their daughter to have stability. Objection. ADA Murphy interrupted. Counsel is testifying. Or sustained, the judge ruled. Sterling regrouped. You mentioned sleeping in your car. Did you ever ask your siblings for help? Here, it was the attempt to shift blame. Sarah knew I was struggling. I called her once desperate. She said I'd made my choice and had to live with it. So you didn't formally request assistance. I shouldn't have had to beg my family for help when they had stolen $400,000 from me, I said firmly. That money was mine, left by grandparents who believed in my dreams, even if my parents didn't. The cross-examination continued for 2 hours. Sterling tried every angle, suggesting mental health issues, artistic temperament, millennial entitlement. But the evidence was too strong. The forged signatures, the FBI's financial analysis, the pattern of fraud extending far beyond just me. Other witnesses followed. Mariah Santos testified about her lost savings. A retired couple described how my parents had sold them a property they didn't actually own. Business partners revealed shell companies and cooked books dating back 15 years. Marcus testified for the prosecution, a decision that had cost him his remaining relationship with our parents. He was brave on the stand, describing the family meeting he'd secretly recorded, the discussions about keeping me local to care for them in old age. They said it was a daughter's duty. He testified, voice shaking, that Kathleen owed them for raising her. I was 17, and even I knew it was wrong. David notably didn't testify, claiming his medical residency made it impossible. Sarah was called as a hostile witness, forced to confirm email exchanges that showed her knowledge of the trust fund theft. Her carefully maintained composure cracked as she realized her legal career might not survive this association. The defense's case was thin. Character witnesses who hadn't seen my parents in years. A psychologist who testified about family dynamics under stress without ever having met us. Sterling's closing argument was a masterpiece of misdirection, but the jury saw through it. After 5 days of deliberation, the verdict came back guilty on all counts. 23 counts of fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy. My parents faced up to 20 years in federal prison. I wasn't in the courtroom for the verdict. I was in London performing at the O2 Arena when Patricia called with the news. 20,000 people were singing along to Empty Promises when I learned my parents had finally faced justice for their broken ones. How do you feel? A BBC interviewer asked the next morning. Relieved that the truth prevailed, I said carefully. Sad that it came to this, but mostly grateful that other victims got justice too. The sentencing came 2 months later. My parents got 12 years each with possibility of parole in 8. The judge called their crimes a grotesque betrayal of parental duty and noted the particular cruelty of stealing from their own child while watching her suffer. They were led away in handcuffs and orange jumpsuits, no designer clothes to hide behind. My mother looked back once, and for a moment I saw something that might have been regret. Or maybe it was just anger at being caught. That night, I performed at Madison Square Garden, my first headlining show at the iconic venue. In the audience was Maria Santos and her daughter, now in remission. Mrs. Chen had flown in from Los Angeles. Marcus sat in the family section I'd created for my chosen family. Anyway, I spotted him in the crowd, tears streaming down his face. He'd lost his parents too in a different way, but we were both learning that sometimes losing toxic family is the only way to find yourself. After the show, we met backstage. I'm proud of you, I told him. Testifying took courage. I learned it from you, he replied. Watching you refuse to let them dim your light taught me I could choose differently. The $1,000 check remained in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, but its meaning had evolved. It was no longer just about my story. It represented everyone who'd been told they weren't worth investing in, everyone who'd had their dreams dismissed or their trust betrayed. A month later, I announced the Kathleen Patterson Foundation for Young Artists, funded initially with the restitution money from my parents' crimes. It would provide grants to talented youth whose families couldn't or wouldn't support their artistic dreams. The first recipient was a 17-year-old violinist from Detroit whose parents wanted her to study engineering. The second was a painter from rural Alabama whose family considered art not real work. Each grant was exactly $400,000, the amount stolen from me now multiplied into hope for others. Standing on stage at the foundation's launch event, wearing my grandmother's necklace, I thought about how far we'd all come. My parents were in federal prison. Sarah's law career was in shambles. David had retreated into his medical practice silent and diminished. But Marcus was in college, paying his own way, studying music therapy. The victims of my parents' fraud had received restitution, and I had transformed from a homeless girl with a guitar into an artist with a platform and purpose. They gave me $1,000 and told me to disappear. I told the crowd of young artists and their supportive families. Instead, I became impossible to ignore. But the real victory isn't my success. It's that my story might prevent another parent from crushing their child's dreams. It's that transparency and truth won over manipulation and lies. The legal battles were over. The truth had prevailed in court and in the court of public opinion. Now came the harder work of building something beautiful from the wreckage of what had been destroyed. As I looked out at those young faces full of hope and talent and dreams their families didn't understand, I made a promise. No one else would have to sleep in their car to prove their art mattered, not if I could help it. The $1,000 had grown into millions. The pain had transformed into purpose, and somewhere I hoped my grandmother was smiling. The second Grammy nomination announcement came on a Tuesday morning while I was in the studio, working on my third album. This time, I was ready for it. This time, I was watching the live stream with my chosen family gathered around me. Marcus, my brother, Mrs. Chenjena, Marcus, my manager, and Ryan Walsh, who'd become like an older brother through everything. The nominees for Album of the Year are, the announcer began, and when she said, "Truth Like Lightning, Kathleen Patterson," the room erupted. But the nominations kept coming. Record of the Year, Song of the Year, Best Pop Vocal Album, and then the one that made me cry, Producer of the Year, Non-Classical. "Ha, 5 again," Ryan said, shaking his head in amazement. "And Producer of the Year. Do you understand how rare that is?" I did. Female producers were still vastly underrepresented in the industry. To be recognized not just as a performer but as the creative force behind my music felt like validation on a whole different level. This time, the media frenzy felt different. I wasn't the homeless girl made good anymore. I was an established artist with a foundation of voice in the industry and hard-won wisdom about survival and success. But peace never lasted long in my life. Within hours of the nominations, my father had given an interview from federal prison. Somehow, he'd convinced a documentary filmmaker that he had a story worth telling. The father's perspective on raising a famous daughter. "I'm proud of her success," he said to the camera, wearing his orange jumpsuit like it was a business suit. "Despite our differences, she's still my daughter. These nominations prove what we always knew. She was destined for greatness." The audacity was breathtaking. Even from prison serving 12 years for fraud, he was trying to claim credit for my achievements. The interview went viral, but not in the way he'd hoped. Comment sections filled with outrage at his narcissism. Is he seriously trying to take credit from a federal prison? One viral tweet read, "The delusion is strong with this one." I refused to respond publicly. But privately, I was furious. They'd stolen my trust fund, watched me struggle, sued me, and now he wanted to bask in reflected glory. The entitlement was pathological. Sarah emerged from her silence to write an op-ed in a legal journal about redemption and reconciliation in families divided by success. She never mentioned that her law license was under review or that she'd known about the trust fund theft. Instead, she positioned herself as an expert on healing family rifts. Sometimes success creates distance between family members, she wrote. The key is remembering the love that existed before the complications. What love, I wanted to scream. The love that let me sleep in my car, the love that stole $400,000. But I channeled the anger into my music instead, writing songs that were sharper, cleaner, more precise in their emotional honesty. Grammy week arrived with all its chaos and glamour. This time, I knew what to expect. The rehearsals, the interviews, the gift suites trying to court nominees. But there was one major difference. This time, I was performing twice. Once for my nominated song and once in a special tribute to women in music productions. Marcus, my brother, was with me officially this time, part of my team as a production assistant. He'd proven himself over the past 2 years, staying quiet, working hard, never trying to capitalize on our connection. He'd even legally changed his last name to Chen, our grandmother's maiden name, to distance himself from our parents. You nervous?" he asked as we did soundcheck at the Staples Center. Terrified, I admitted. Last time felt like a dream. This time, I know exactly how big this is. The performance costume fittings revealed another surprise. Versace had designed a custom gown embedded with LED lights that would pulse with my heartbeat during the performance. It was technology meeting artistry, perfect for a producer-performer. "You're not just wearing fashion," the designer explained. "You're wearing your music. Your actual life force will be visible." 3 days before the ceremony, more drama emerged. My parents' former business partner, who'd fled the country before the FBI investigation, had been extradited and arrested. He was offering to testify about even deeper fraud, including an attempt to take out life insurance policies on all 4 children without our knowledge. "It never ends," I told Janet when she called with the news. "Every time I think we've hit bottom with them, there's another layer." "The good news is, this adds years to their sentences if proven," she said. "They won't be bothering you for a very long time." Grammy night arrived in a blur of preparation. The red carpet felt different this year. I wasn't wide-eyed and overwhelmed, but confident and present. When reporters asked about my family, I had a practiced response ready. "I'm focused on the future, not the past. Tonight is about celebrating music and the incredible artists here." But one reporter persisted. "Your father gave an interview from prison. Any response?" "Orange isn't his color," I said, then moved on before they could follow up. Inside, I found my seat in the front section again. Marcus sat beside me wearing a tux that fit perfectly thanks to my stylist. He kept checking his phone and I could see our mother's prison email address trying to contact him. He blocked it without reading. "Good choice," I murmured. "Learn from the best," he replied, squeezing my hand. The tribute to women producers came early in the show. I stood on stage with 4 other female producers, each of us representing different genres and generations. When my turn came to speak, I looked directly into the camera. "They told me music wasn't a real career," I said, "that I should be grateful for any attention, let alone creative control. But here's the truth. Women don't just perform music. We create it, shape it, produce it, and own it. To every girl watching who's been told to stand in the background, pick up the board, learn the software, trust your ears. The studio needs your voice too." The performance of Truth Like Lightning was electric. The LED dress worked perfectly my heartbeat, visible to millions as the song built to its climax. During the bridge where I sang about choosing truth over comfort, my heart rate spiked and the dress blazed like fire. The standing ovation felt endless. But the real moment came during the Producer of the Year announcement. This wasn't a televised category. It happened during the pre-show. Ryan was there with me having presented an earlier award. And the Grammy goes to... The envelope opened in slow motion. Kathleen Patterson. I froze. Then Ryan was lifting me up, hugging me, pushing me toward the stage. The trophy felt heavier than last year, or maybe that was just the weight of what it represented. A female producer winning in a male-dominated field, a self-taught artist beating industry veterans, a homeless girl who'd recorded vocals in her car now recognized for her production skills. 2 years ago, I was recording demos in a studio held together with duct tape and dreams, I said into the microphone. Jenna at Riverside Records taught me that production isn't about having the best equipment. It's about knowing your truth and finding the sound that serves it. This is for every bedroom producer making magic with nothing but laptop speakers and determination. Your limitations are your superpowers. Use them. By the time the televised show reached Album of the Year, I'd already won 3 Grammys. Song of the Year had gone to someone else, but Best Pop Vocal Album was mine. The dress, which had started the evening pristine white, now showed traces of happy tears and champagne from celebrations. The Album of the Year is... The pause felt eternal. Then, Truth Like Lightning, Kathleen Patterson. This time I was ready. I hugged Marcus, kissed Mrs. Chen on the cheek, and walked steadily to the stage. 4 Grammys in one night, including the big one. As I accepted the trophy, I thought about that storage unit full of my grandmother's letters, the trust fund that should have paid for my education, the family that had tried to destroy me. This album is called Truth Like Lightning, because truth like lightning illuminates everything in a flash, I said. Sometimes what it reveals is painful. Sometimes it's beautiful, but it's always, always necessary. I held up the Grammy, catching the lights. My grandmother used to say that music was in our blood. She was right, but what's also in my blood is resilience passed down from generations of women who were told their dreams were too big, too impractical, too much. This is for every grandmother who played jazz in clubs that wouldn't let her in the front door. For every mother who sang lullabies instead of arias because the world wasn't ready for her voice. And for every daughter who's being told right now that her dreams don't matter. I found Marcus in the audience, tears streaming down his face. 2 years ago, my family gave me $1,000 and told me I was no longer their daughter. Tonight, I stand here with 4 Grammys and a message. Your worth is not determined by those who refuse to see it. You are not obligated to shrink to fit someone else's comfort. Take up space, make noise, tell your truth like lightning, and let it illuminate the world. The aftermath was everything I dreamed and more. Backstage artists I'd idolized congratulated me. Beyoncé hugged me and whispered, "That speech, that's what we needed to hear." Taylor Swift found me to say she'd watched my documentary 3 times and wanted to collaborate. But the moment that mattered most came in my dressing room after. Marcus had arranged a video call with the kids from my foundation. 17 young artists, all pursuing dreams their families didn't support, cheering and crying and holding up homemade signs. "You did it!" screamed Maria, the violinist from Detroit. 4 Grammys and Producer of the Year. You showed them all? "We did it," I corrected. "Every time you pick up your instrument, despite the doubts, we do it together." As parties raged across Los Angeles, I found myself on the roof of my hotel with my inner circle. Mrs. Chen had made tea. Ryan played guitar softly. Marcus sorted through the 100 of congratulatory messages, screening out anyone connected to our parents. "They're both trying to call from prison," he said quietly. "Different numbers, but I recognize the area code." "Block them all," I said without hesitation. "Already done." At 3 in the morning, as Los Angeles glittered below us, I held my 4 new Grammys, 7 total now, and felt the weight of how far we'd come. From sleeping in cars to sweeping the Grammys, from family betrayal to choosing better bonds, from $1,000 insult to millions in the bank. "What's next?" Ryan asked. I thought about it. World tour was already booked. The foundation was expanding. The music was evolving. But there was one thing left to do. "I want to buy a house," I said. "Something permanent, with a real studio and guest rooms for the family I've chosen." "In LA," Jenna asked. "Nashville," I decided, where it all turned around, where I stopped running from the pain and started running toward the future. As the sun rose over the city of angels, painting the sky in shades of gold and possibility, I knew the Grammys were just trinkets compared to what I'd really won. Freedom, truth, the ability to transform pain into power, and a family bound by choice rather than chance. Somewhere in federal prison, my parents were probably planning their next manipulation, their next attempt at relevance. Let them. I had 7 Grammys, a foundation changing lives, and a truth that no amount of their lies could diminish. The girl who'd been worth only $1,000 to them was now worth millions to the world. But more importantly, she'd learned her worth had never been about money at all. It was about the music in her blood, the strength in her spirit, and the truth in her voice. And that was priceless. The call came at 2 a.m, 3 weeks after the Grammys. I was in Nashville, having just closed on a beautiful Victorian house with a converted barn studio on 3 acres. The renovation crew had left hours ago, and I was sitting on the floor of what would be my music room, surrounded by blueprints and possibilities. "Kathleen." It was Marcus, my brother, and his voice was strange. "Dad's in the hospital. Heart attack. It's bad." I set down my guitar carefully, feeling the world shift. "How bad?" "They're saying 50-50. Mom managed to call me from the prison. She's begging you to come." I was silent for so long, he asked if I was still there. "I need to think," I finally said. "I'll call you back." I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I walked through my empty house, this symbol of everything I'd built without them, and wrestled with the decision. The man who'd thrown me out with nothing was possibly dying. The man who'd stolen my future, who'd tried to destroy me even from prison, was asking for his daughter. By morning, I'd made 17 pro and con lists and talked to everyone who mattered. Ryan thought I should go for my own closure. Jenna worried it was another manipulation. Mrs. Chen, wise as always, asked only one question. "What would you regret more, going or not going?" Marcus, my manager, was practical. "If you go, we control everything. Security limits, documentation. They don't get to hurt you again." I called Janet, my lawyer. "Can I even visit with all the legal battles?" "Technically, yes, but I'd recommend extreme caution. Document everything. Bring witnesses. Don't sign anything. Don't agree to anything. Don't let them manipulate your emotions." The decision tormented me for 2 days. During that time, his condition stabilized but remained critical. The media caught wind, of course. "Grammy winners, father, critical, will there be a deathbed reconciliation?" the headline screamed. I was in the studio trying to work through my feelings in song when Marcus, my brother, called again. "I'm gonna see him," he said. "Not for them, for me. I need to face this. Would you come with me?" That decided it. Not for my parents, but for my brother, who was trying so hard to break the cycle. "Okay," I said, "but on my terms." My terms were non-negotiable. Limited visit time, my security present, Janet on standby, and absolutely no media statements afterward from them or their representatives. The federal prison hospital in Rochester was a 4-hour drive from Nashville. Marcus and I made the journey together, the first long stretch of time we'd spent alone as adults. We talked about everything except where we were going. Music, his therapy; progress, his girlfriend who didn't know about our family drama yet. "How do you tell someone your parents are in federal prison for fraud?" he asked as we crossed into Kentucky. You wait until you trust them completely, I said. Then you tell them the truth and see if they stay. The prison was exactly as depressing as expected. Gray walls, gray floors, gray energy. We went through multiple security checkpoints, each one stripping away another layer of the outside world. By the time we reached the medical wing, I felt like I'd entered a different dimension. He was in a secured room, machines beeping, tubes everywhere. The orange jumpsuit had been replaced with a hospital gown, making him look fragile and human in a way I hadn't seen since childhood. My mother sat beside him in her own prison uniform, hands cuffed to the chair. She looked up when we entered, and for a moment I saw her as she was. Not the manipulator, not the thief, but a woman whose choices had led her to watching her husband possibly die while chained to a chair in federal prison. "Oh, Kathleen," she breathed, "you came." I didn't respond, just stood at the foot of the bed with Marcus beside me. My father's eyes were closed, but I could see his chest rising and falling. "He's sedated," she explained, "but he can hear you. The doctor said talking might help." What was there to say that I forgave them? I didn't. That I wished things were different. That was obvious. That despite everything, seeing him like this hurt. That was the truth I wasn't ready to speak. Marcus spoke first. "Dad, it's Marcus and Kathleen. We're here." My father's eyes fluttered open, unfocused at first, then sharpening as they found us. He tried to speak, but couldn't around the breathing tube. His hand moved slightly on the blanket, and my mother interpreted. "He wants to write something," she said. "The nurse left a pad." Part of me wanted to refuse. How many times had his words been weapons? But Marcus was already handing him the pad and pen. With shaking hands, he wrote one word: "Sorry." I stared at that word written in his familiar handwriting, now made shaky by medication and weakness. Sorry, 5 letters that were supposed to erase years of betrayal, theft, abandonment. For what? I asked, surprising myself by speaking. For stealing my trust fund, for throwing me out, for trying to destroy my career, for giving interviews from prison, taking credit for my success. Which part are you sorry for? He wrote again laboriously, all of it. My mother started crying. "Kathleen, please. He might be dying. Can't you—" Can't I what?" I interrupted. "Pretend it didn't happen, grant absolution to make you feel better? You stole $400,000 from me. You watched me sleep in my car. You sued me for telling the truth. And now you want forgiveness because he's sick." "We were wrong," she said, and those 3 words were the first honest thing I'd heard from her in years. We were wrong about everything. We let greed and fear make us monsters. We destroyed our family for money and control. I felt Marcus's hand on my arm grounding me. He was watching our parents with the same mixture of pain and resignation I felt. "I succeeded without you," I said quietly. "Not to spite you, but in spite of you. Every Grammy, every sold-out show, every life my foundation changes. That's proof that you were wrong about me. Wrong about what matters. Wrong about everything." My father was writing again, a longer message this time. "Proud of you, both of you. Watched every show from here. You became everything we were too scared to let you be." "Don't," I said sharply, "don't you dare claim pride in something you tried to prevent. You're not proud parents. You're criminals who happen to share DNA with successful children you tried to destroy." The monitors started beeping faster. A nurse came and checked readings, suggested we keep things calm, but I was done being calm. "You want to know the worst part?" I asked. "It wasn't the money. It wasn't the homelessness. It was that you made me doubt myself. Made me think maybe my dreams really were worthless. Every night in that car, I wondered if you were right, if I was delusional for thinking music mattered. That's what I can't forgive. You tried to kill the thing that made me who I am." "We were trying to protect you," my mother said weakly. "No," Marcus spoke up. "You were trying to control her. Us. You wanted obedient children who would follow your script and take care of you in old age. When Kathleen refused, you punished her. When I benefited from that punishment, I stayed quiet. We all failed her. At least I'm trying to make amends. What are you doing besides asking for forgiveness you haven't earned? My father's hand was moving again, but this time he pushed the pad away. With enormous effort, he reached up and removed the oxygen mask. Kath! Lean! He managed his voice barely a whisper. The money. What about it? I asked. Hidden account. Cayman. Each word was a struggle. 2 million. Yours. My mother's sharp intake of breath told me this was news to her too. Thomas, what are you talking about? He gestured weakly for the pad again. With trembling hands, he wrote, Account 447829, Security Question Songbird, always meant for you. Life insurance. I felt the room spin. $2 million, hidden offshore, always meant for me. It didn't make sense. If you had 2 million hidden away, why did you let me struggle? I asked. He wrote one more word before the effort exhausted him. Test. A test. They'd let me live in my car, work 3 jobs, nearly freeze to death as some kind of test. The rage that filled me was pure and clean. You tested me, I said, my voice deadly quiet. My survival was entertainment for you. Watching me suffer was what? Character building. The machines went crazy. Nurses rushed in, pushing us back. My father's eyes rolled back, his body convulsing. They called for doctors, started CPR. We were ushered into the hallway where we could hear the frantic activity, but see nothing. Marcus slumped against the wall. $2 million. They had 2 million hidden, and they gave you 1,000. We waited in that gray hallway for an hour before a doctor emerged. He's stable but critical, the stress of the visit. Perhaps it's best if you go. My mother was brought out looking older than her 58 years. Don't leave, she pleaded. Not like this. There might not be another chance. There already wasn't another chance, I said. It ended when you changed the locks. Everything since then has been aftermath. The money, she started. I don't want it, I cut her off. Keep your hidden millions. I made my own. Ooh, Kathleen, please. My lawyer will be in touch about the Cayman account, I said formally, not because I need it, but because if it exists, it's evidence of further fraud. Enjoy prison, Helen. You earned it. Marcus and I left them there, him fighting for his life, her fighting for a redemption that would never come. In the car, we were silent for the first hour, processing what had just happened. A test, Marcus finally said. They destroyed your life as a test. And I passed, I said. Now, without them, despite them, that's the only thing that matters. We were crossing back into Tennessee when my phone rang. It was the prison hospital. He'd had another massive heart attack. He was gone. I pulled over to the side of the highway, not because I needed to cry, but because I needed to breathe. My father was dead. The man who'd raised me, who taught me to ride a bike and tie my shoes, and then tried to destroy my dreams, was gone. How do you feel? Marcus asked. I thought about it, really examined the emotions swirling through me. Free, I finally said. Sad for the father he could have been, angry at the father he was, but mostly free. We drove the rest of the way home in companionable silence. That night in my new Nashville house, I gathered my chosen family. We didn't mourn. We didn't celebrate. We simply acknowledged that a chapter had closed. Will you go to the funeral? Mrs. Chen asked. Well, what funeral? I replied. He's a federal prisoner who died in custody. Whatever happens next is the Bureau of Prisons' problem, not mine. But I did do one thing. I called Janet and had her investigate the Cayman account. It existed exactly as he'd said. $2 million hidden offshore accumulated through years of fraud. The FBI was very interested. You could claim it, Janet said. As a victim of their crimes, you'd have a case. Give it to the other victims, I decided. Split among everyone they defrauded. And Janet, make sure it's public. I want everyone to know they had millions hidden while claiming poverty. The story broke 3 days later. My father's death, The hidden money, my refusal to claim it despite having legal grounds. The media painted me as either a saint or a fool, but I didn't care. I'd proven my point. I didn't need their money. I'd never needed it. All I'd needed was the truth and the chance to prove them wrong. Sarah released a statement about the tragic loss of our father and the complicated grief of estranged families. David said nothing as usual, but Marcus stood by me, releasing his own statement. Our father died as he lived, keeping secrets and causing pain. The only tragedy is that he never learned money can't buy redemption. I channeled everything into music, writing songs about complicated grief and the freedom that comes from refusing to forgive the unforgivable. The album that emerged, No Absolution, would become my most critically acclaimed work. But on that night, driving back from the prison, I wasn't thinking about albums or statements or hidden millions. I was thinking about the teenage girl who'd stood in her childhood home acceptance letter in hand, dreams ablaze with possibility. She deserved parents who celebrated her gifts, who supported her journey, who loved her unconditionally. She didn't get them, but she got something else. The strength to survive their absence, the courage to build a life without their approval, and the wisdom to know that some tests aren't worth passing if they require you to break. My father was dead. My mother would spend at least another decade in prison. The family that had thrown me away with $1,000 and false promises was destroyed. And from those ashes, I'd built an empire of truth, talent, and chosen bonds that no amount of hidden money could buy. The test was over. I'd won, and the prize was a life lived entirely on my own terms. 2 years. That's how long it had been since my father died in that prison hospital, since I'd discovered the hidden millions, since I'd made the choice to forge ahead without forgiveness. 2 years of continued success, of building my foundation, of creating music that resonated with millions who'd also been told they weren't enough. Now I stood backstage at Madison Square Garden, about to perform for a sold-out crowd of 20,000. My fourth album had debuted at number 1. The foundation had helped over 100 young artists escape situations like mine. I'd won 3 more Grammys, bringing my total to 10. By every measure, I'd made it. 5 minutes, Kathleen, the stage manager, called. I nodded, adjusting the vintage leather jacket I'd bought at a thrift store during my homeless months. I still wore it for important shows, a reminder of where I'd been. My grandmother's necklace caught the light as I moved its diamonds real where everything else had been fake. My phone buzzed. Marcus, my brother, texting from the VIP section. Sarah's here, front row, don't let her throw you. I hadn't seen my sister since the trial. After our father's death, she'd served 6 months for obstruction of justice related to the fraud case her law career destroyed. Last I'd heard, she was teaching at a community college rebuilding from scratch. 30 seconds. I walked to my position, guitar in hand, listening to the crowd's energy building. This was my farewell show, at least for a while. After tonight, I was taking a year off to focus on the foundation and start a music therapy program with Marcus, who'd gotten his certification with flying colors. The lights dimmed. The crowd roared. I walked onto the stage and 20,000 phone lights created a galaxy in the darkness. Montern. I said into the microphone, "You've been with me since the beginning. Since I was sleeping in my car and playing for whoever would listen, this is for you." I opened with Midnight Shift, the song about working at Fit Life, and the crowd sang every word. By the time I reached Empty Promises, the energy was electric. But I could see Sarah in the front row, tears streaming down her face as I sang about betrayal and abandonment. Halfway through the set, I did something unplanned. I stopped between songs and looked directly at her. Family is complicated," I said, and the venue went silent. Some of you know my story, know that the people who should have loved me chose money instead. One of those people is here tonight. The camera operators scrambled, trying to figure out who I meant. Sarah shrank in her seat. I could pretend she's not here. could ignore her like she ignored my calls when I was desperate. But that's not who I am anymore. I paused, feeling 20,000 people holding their breath. Sarah, you failed me when I needed you most. You knew about the theft and stayed silent. You chose their approval over my survival. But you also paid a price I wouldn't wish on anyone. Your career, your reputation, your sense of self, all destroyed by the same greed that nearly destroyed me. She was sobbing now, openly, no longer trying to hide. I don't forgive you, I continued. Some things break too badly to be repaired, but I see you. I see you trying to rebuild, and that takes courage. So here's what I can offer. Not forgiveness, but acknowledgement. You're trying to be better. That matters. The crowd was absolutely still. This wasn't the feel-good reconciliation they might have expected. It was messier, more honest, more real. This next song is about learning that healing doesn't always mean forgiving. Sometimes it just means moving forward anyway. I played No Absolution, and the raw emotion in the venue was palpable. Sarah stayed for the entire show, tears never stopping, but she didn't try to come backstage after. She understood the boundaries I'd set. The show continued with songs spanning my entire journey. Marcus joined me for a duet on Choosing Different, a song we'd written together about breaking family cycles. Mrs. Chen was brought on stage for a special acknowledgement, the crowd giving her a 3-minute standing ovation when I told them about the table she'd saved for me at the Songbird Cafe. As we neared the end, I sat at the piano for a stripped-down version of Truth Like Lightning. But first, I had something to share. My mother gets out of prison in 6 months. I said, the words hanging heavy in the air. She's served 8 years of a 12-year sentence. Good behavior, apparently. She'll be 67 years old with no money, no home, no family willing to claim her. And you know what? That's exactly what she deserves. What? Some people gasped. Others applauded. The truth was complicated like that. But here's what I've learned. I continued, fingers finding the opening chords. Holding on to anger is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. I'm not angry anymore. I'm not even sad. I'm just done. They wrote their story. I wrote mine, and mine is so much better. The song built slowly, and by the final chorus, the entire venue was singing. 20,000 voices united in a song about truth and its consequences. For the finale, I'd planned something special. The stage filled with young artists from my foundation, each holding an instrument. There was Maria with her violin, James with his saxophone destiny at the drums, 100 kids whose families had rejected their dreams now standing on the Madison Square Garden stage. 3 years ago, I stood in a courtroom and promised that no one else would have to sleep in their car to prove their art mattered, I said. These incredible young artists are proof that promise meant something. They are the future, and their families' small-mindedness couldn't stop them. Nothing can stop us when we refuse to be stopped. We performed Rising Anyway together, 100 voices and instruments, creating a wall of sound that shook the building. The crowd was on their feet, many crying, all celebrating. This was bigger than my story now. This was about every dreamer who'd been told they weren't practical, weren't realistic, weren't worthy of investment. As the last note rang out, confetti cannons exploded, filling the air with golden paper. But not just any paper. Each piece was a copy of that $1,000 check, the one still hanging in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Thousands of reminders that sometimes the smallest gestures reveal the biggest truths. New York, you've given me more than I can ever repay, I said as the confetti settled. You gave me a chance when my own blood wouldn't. You gave me stages to grow on and audiences who understood. You gave me the career my parents tried to steal. Thank you for believing in the girl with nothing but pain and a guitar. Thank you for making me impossible to ignore. The ovation lasted 15 minutes. When I finally left the stage, emotionally and physically drained, my team was waiting with champagne and tears. But I had one more thing to do. In my dressing room, I found an envelope slipped under the door, Sarah's handwriting, inside a single sheet of paper. I know you can't forgive me. I can't forgive myself, but I wanted you to know I've started a legal aid program for young adults disowned by their families. Free legal help for kids like you were. It's not enough. It will never be enough, but it's what I can do. I'm so sorry, Kathleen, for all of it. S. I folded the letter carefully and put it in my jacket pocket. It didn't change the past, but it was something. Sarah using her skills to help others in my situation. Marcus building a career in music therapy. Even David had quietly started donating to arts programs, though he still maintained his silence. We'd all been shaped by our parents' greed and cruelty, but while they rotted in prison, literally in our father's case, their children were finding ways to transform that poison into purpose. Later that night at the after-party, I sat with my chosen family in a private room overlooking Times Square. Marcus, my manager, was fielding offers for the next tour whenever I was ready. Jenna was talking about the new artists she'd signed to Riverside, continuing the tradition of believing in the overlooked. Ryan Walsh, now more brother than mentor, was teaching my foundation kids the guitar riff from his biggest hit. "You did it," Mrs. Chen said, patting my hand. "You survived them all." "We did it," I corrected. "None of this happens alone." My phone buzzed with a news alert. The documentary about my story had been nominated for an Emmy. The foundation had received its largest donation ever from a tech billionaire who'd also been disowned for pursuing impractical dreams. The ripple effects continued wider and wider circles of impact. As midnight approached, I excused myself and went up to the roof. New York sprawled beneath me, lights twinkling like earthbound stars. Somewhere in this city, a kid was probably sleeping in their car tonight, dreams intact despite family rejection. Somewhere, parents were making the same mistake mine had, choosing control over connection, choosing fear over faith. But somewhere else, my foundation kids were going to sleep in safe beds, instruments within reach, futures bright with possibility. Somewhere, a parent was reading my story and choosing differently, choosing to believe in their child's impractical dreams. Somewhere, the truth was setting people free. I pulled out my phone and looked at the photo Marcus had sent earlier. Our grandmother at the Cotton Club wearing the necklace I now wore lost in the music. She'd never gotten the chances I had, but she'd planted the seeds. The music gene, the resilience gene, the refusal to be silenced gene. "Thank you," I whispered to her memory, "for the necklace, for the music, for showing me it was in my blood all along." A year from now, I'd be deep in the music therapy program, helping traumatized kids find their voices through songs. 5 years from now, the foundation would be nationwide, saving dreamers in every state. 10 years from now, some kid I'd never meet would stand on their own stage, telling their own story of survival, wearing their own version of my vintage leather jacket. But tonight, I was just Kathleen Patterson, the girl who'd been worth only $1,000 to her parents, the woman who'd turned that insult into an empire, the artist who'd learned that sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's a life lived so fully, so authentically, so successfully that the people who tried to dim your light become nothing more than footnotes in your brilliant story. I touched my grandmother's necklace one more time, then headed back to my party. My real family was waiting, the ones who'd chosen me when I had nothing to offer but potential, the ones who'd believed when belief seemed foolish. The $1,000 check would hang in that museum forever, a reminder of how wrong people can be about value, about worth, about what matters. But I didn't need to see it anymore. I knew my worth now. It had nothing to do with money and everything to do with the music in my blood, the truth in my voice, and the love I'd found in unexpected places. My parents had given me $1,000 and told me to disappear. Instead, I became undeniable, and that's the end of the story. Or maybe it's just the beginning. Have you ever had to choose between family expectations and your dreams? How did you find the courage to follow your own path? Share your story in the comments below. You might inspire someone who needs to hear it today. And if this story resonated with you, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel. Share it with anyone who needs a reminder that their dreams matter, regardless of who believes in them. Thank you for listening to my journey. Remember, you are not obligated to dim your light for anyone's comfort. Shine bright, dream big, and never let anyone convince you that your truth isn't worth telling. Until next time, this is Kathleen reminding you, you are already enough, you are already worthy, and your dreams already matter.